Sorry.
Want me to hold on to it for you?
Yeah. Thank you.
Uh-huh. Put it right here.
Good evening. If you're going to speak, would you mind filling out a speaker's card in the back, out in the front, and give them to the clerk, if you would, please?
I have them up here too. If you so should. Good evening. Good, how are you?
Good. How's everyone?
Very good.
You will take that for
I can take that for you if you like.
just to keep her up if you wish. I won't forget that.
Okay.
Oh, there you go. Boy, that was, right off the bat. Make sure I don't forget.
I wouldn't.
There's like two in the car, but unfortunately I'm not in the car, right? That's the way it usually works out.
Oh, yes.
Look at you.
Okay, we'll call the meeting for May 15th, the city council here in the city chambers. Rocky, would you mind leading us in the pledge, please, sir?
I'd be honored. Thank Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, everybody. Call the roll, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown,
Here.
Mayor Hogue,
Here.
Councilmember Merson,
Here.
Councilmember Randalls,
Present.
Councilmember Raymond.
Here.
Okay, I have 3 speaker cards, and the first one was Shirley Kopinski.
Good evening, everybody, and I just here to say, to address the whole council, and thank you for what you are doing, and thank you. I realize there's many, many years of skills that you have and you bring to here, but most of all, I really want to thank Wes Morris, because he asks questions that I need answers, and he gives me that answer. And so I adjure you to please use grace and patience for him, because I'm speaking for me, many other people, that we need to hear the answers to those questions. So I thank you for exercising that. And I thank you for each and every one, the gifts and talents you've added and bring together. And it's a cohesiveness that when you work together and you receive from one another, that comes forth for the good of Cape Canaveral. So I thank you for it.
Thank you. Jim Houston.
Good evening, Council. Jim Houston, 502 Jackson Avenue. And I just wanted to bring it to your attention that as a long-time Cape Canaveral resident, I've been involved with the CO plannings every year. Currently 502 Jackson Avenue the past 14 years, and dating back to 1988 on Monroe Avenue right behind me. This year was kind of tough with the sand replenishment project. Kind of interrupted what we wanted to do out there. But we did get some plants planted at the end of Jackson Avenue, out at the end of the street in front of the condo to the north, which is the Cape Club. Having seen that and been part of it, I just wanted you to be aware that I'm exercising my right as a public servant, if you will, and as a volunteer I've engaged with the state EP, Jason Spainer, to go about it in the proper manner to put a post and rope line from the crossover out in front of the new sea oats in order to keep the visiting folks to the beach out of the sea oats, because they're already trampling through the new ones that have been planted. I see it's occurred at Harbor Heights, and apparently under the guidance of the state EP, and as a non-related project to that, I'm pursuing it on Jackson Avenue. Along with my neighbors, Stephen and Barbara Fife, who live in the Cape Club. They represent that, they'll be representing that side of the street, and I just wanted you to be aware of that. I had put out some stakes and survey tape temporarily. It worked, it kept people out, but then when they broke down, and they don't last forever, they were taken down by the city people, and that's fine, I understand that. So we'll be pursuing a permanent installation that I would maintain. And having said that, would like to see the city maybe carry on the idea for the other streets throughout the city of Cape Canaveral. I think it's beneficial, and we need the COs need the protection. There's more people that go to the beach that don't recognize that they do need the protection. And having said that, that's all I wanted to share with you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
Marilyn Nicholas.
Good evening. My name is Marilyn Nicholas. Honorable Mayor, council members. It's so nice to see you in this new building after all these years. I first want to thank the city. As the chairman for the Cape Canaveral Public Library Advisory Board, I want to thank you for your participation in the memorial celebration that we had Saturday for Joanna Atwood. The food was delicious and plentiful, and you know, strangers aren't quite such strangers when they have food. But I had a conversation a couple of weeks ago with Mayor Hogue, and he said, what can the city do to help with the Space Coast Art Festival? I've brought some information for each of you council members. One is a sponsorship brochure, this packet here. One is a list of the volunteers, the kinds of volunteers that we need, the services that we need from the volunteers. And the other sheet that goes with that is if somebody chooses to volunteer, what position they would volunteer in and what times they might serve. So I would like to give this packet to each of the council members, if I may. And we've been diligently working since January to get this going, so we're really hopeful for this year and look forward to a really good art festival. Thank you.
Thank you, Marilyn.
Thank you.
Yeah, next item is a presentation. Mark Carbone, are you here?
Thank you, Mayor.
It's the proclamation, but I guess he's not here to receive it. So I'm going to read it into the record. Proclamation for the city of Cape Canaveral, Florida. Whereas every 7 minutes and 30 seconds, one woman in the United States loses her battle with lung cancer, and whereas lung cancer is the leading cause of cancer deaths for women and men in the United States. And whereas advocacy and increased awareness will result in screening and early detection for people with lung cancer that will ultimately save lives. And whereas public support for research funding will result in better treatment and early detection methods that will ultimately save lives. And whereas Lung Force is a national initiative led by the American Lung Association to defeat lung cancer. Now I, therefore, Robert Hogue, Mayor of Cape Canaveral, Brevard County, Florida, do hereby proclaim the week of May 6, 12 as Women's Lung Health Week in the city of Cape Canaveral. Encourage all residents to learn more about lung cancer, risk factors, and screening options. Thank you. It's also signed the 2nd of May. Okay, we'll move on to interview an applicant for the Planning and Zoning Board, Melissa Bass. Good evening again, Melissa. How are you?
Hello.
You got the floor.
Okay.
Oh, the attorney is going to talk to you.
Hi, good evening. Nice to see you again. I saw you at the Planning and Zoning Board meeting. First question, just a matter of formality. All the information in your application still true and correct?
Yes.
To the best of your knowledge, okay. Please explain to the City Council why you would like to serve on the Planning and Zoning Board.
Well, I'm a resident of Cape Canaveral since 2009. My background is in interior design. I've been a practicing designer for since 2005. And as I've lived here in Cape Canaveral, I've enjoyed a lot of volunteer opportunities, and I've seen some growth and changes. And I feel like with my experience in residential and commercial and government projects that I might have some knowledge that I could bring to the table with the planning and zoning group as far as understanding how to speak with engineers and looking at site plans and general technical knowledge in that area.
Okay,
Okay.
I'm going to open it up to the council. Let's start down with the, down on the end down there, please. You?
I don't have any questions.
What?
I know Melissa.
Hi.
I speak to her in the library all the time.
Oh, that's
So
good.
I think she'll be
No introduction needed there, right?
a great addition to the planning and zoning board.
Thank you.
Okay, Rocky?
Yeah, thank you. Ms. Bass, I noticed that you chose 3 areas that you desire to work in, Community Appearance Board, and this happens to be your 3rd, the Planning and Zoning. But the next line down, you put something that really caught my eye. Where it said other, you says, I'll do whatever might be best, utilize my skills. And we thank you. We're welcome to have you. You've got a lot of experience I think we can use, mainly youth, that's important from my viewpoint. And, but thank you for being here. Thank you for volunteering. And I think you do well in it.
Well, thank you.
Hi, Melissa.
Hi.
Yes, thank you so much. We're very excited to have the opportunity to interview and to see, whether whatever it takes attitude is awesome. And I'm excited to know that you've got a great background for this, and what an important board to serve on, arguably one of the most important ones, a critical role. And I just would encourage you that every decision you make, just take into the factors that it could be one of all three, but it affects life, liberty, or property. And I know you'll do a great job, and just thank you so much to you and your husband and contributing to the community. So thank you.
Hello, Melissa. You and your husband are basically, I would say, the consummate nice couple in Cape Canaveral. I hope getting into the trenches with the planning and zoning, I know you won't let it change you. And I look forward to seeing you work with the city. And like I said, I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
Excuse me. I feel welcome to you. I feel the same way as the rest of the council. And I think you're a good fit, because I notice you do have a lot of experience with architects, engineers, and that
Yes.
kind of gets into some of that. And contractors, of course. And, I do welcome you, and I will be looking forward to working with you. And best of luck to you and your endeavors. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to have later in the evening,
done with me?
we'll come through with the,
All right, thank you so
we'll
much.
do that in just a few minutes.
Thank you.
Okay, our next item, we got my list. We got our consent agenda. Anybody care to remove anything for discussion? Items 1 through 5.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to pull items number 1 and 4, please, for discussion.
1 and 4, okay. Anybody else? Nobody else, will call for a motion for 2, 3, and 5.
Mayor, if you're looking for a motion to approve the remaining 3, I would move for approval of 2, 3, and 5.
And I'll second it.
Thank you. I keep looking the wrong way. I gotta get used to her down there.
Oh.
We have a motion for 2, 3, and 5.
Yep.
Motion by Mr. Randalls and a second by Angela. Call the
Mayor-
roll, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown,
4.
Mayor Hogue,
4.
Councilmember Morrison,
4.
Councilmember Randalls,
For the motion.
Councilmember Raymond.
4.
Okay, Mr. Morrison.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. In regards to the minutes, just one small change of clarification. I think it's an important one on item number 5, referencing ordinance number 4, 2018. This was on the first reading of location of pharmacies and medical marijuana treatment center dispensing facilities within the city. Down at the bottom, I believe, where it gets into the fail, where I made the motion and it was failed, correct me if I'm wrong, Mayor, but I do believe that you expressed your concern about the fact that we had published an ad at that time. And your concern was because we had published an ad into the community, it was kind of, I think you quoted, a bait and switch type deal, and you didn't want to do that. And I thought there was a lot of logic in that argument. And you might have had other reasons for not. And in that moment, I clarified with city staff, I think specifically city manager at the time, who I think him and Anthony confirmed that in fact there was an ad published on the first and the second, and one would also be needed for the second reading as well. I think it's important that the minutes show that, and I just would like to make that request. And if you want to hear that in a short version, which might make sense to me, if this council approves, is that Mayor Hogue expressed his concern on an ad being published, and Councilmember Morrison requested clarification, and staff confirmed that in fact it was published for the first and it would be for the second reading. And that's all I had.
I don't have a problem with that, personally. Anybody got anything they want to add to that, or?
I have another little correction, but not on this.
Let's be sure we're all clear. Councilmember Morrison, I think there was lots of confusion, definitely. And I think where we were is I made some comments to the effect that it would be published on second reading. And because of the nature of this ordinance and state requirements, it should have been advertised for the last meeting and was not. So when we get to the mayor's comments, the way, and please everybody bear with me and correct me if I don't have this right. And so what we're doing is tonight we're still having first reading on the medical marijuana treatment facility ordinance, if I may call it that. I was wrong, and staff made a mistake in failing to advertise. I think the city attorney in concept had it right, even though when we listened to the record, there was just a lot of confusion, let's just put it that way. But the reality is it was not properly advertised. So unfortunately, or fortunately, depending where we land, the council, therefore, the comments that the mayor made were accurate in the context that he believed it had been advertised, but it wasn't. Does any of that starting to make sense? David, help me.
That's exactly the situation. There
Yeah,
was
we
confusion.
blew it, yeah.
Yeah, because of the nature of the ordinance, we do very few of these. And frankly, David's falling on his sword up there, but I'm the one that failed to properly notice it and get to work with the city clerk's office and make sure they did what I needed them to do, and I failed to do that. So for that purpose, we're doing first reading again. And
that may or may not have affected the decision that was made at the last meeting and the discussion that occurred.
And that's why we're doing first reading again, so the council can have another bite at the apple, so to speak.
And I think, so if I may, then all of the discussion theoretically that occurred last time, again, is relevant.
Yeah, no disagreement. The confusion was high, and thank you for going back and forth. We all make mistakes. I understand that, certainly. And just in that moment, if you watch that video, it was a logical argument by the mayor, and, hindsight's clear, but it was for the reasons of this being a quote, bait and switch type deal. I made the second, had we known in that time, wow, and had maybe you'd known in that moment of through the confusion, we actually have not ran an ad. And because we had not ran an ad, we can openly discuss this. Who's to know how it would have went that day, but I felt like there might have been a little bit more receptiveness from the council. Had that valid point been factual, where we stand today, we can move forward. But I just want to accurately document, and I think that was a critical moment in last week's meeting, that had we known, it might have went in a different direction.
Yes, I think so.
Well, Councilman Morrison, so basically what you're saying, you still want the marijuana parcels, you still want them in C1, all parcels as far as the marijuana dispensary. Is that what you're saying?
In regards to the minutes here, I think that was accurate to how I voted last time, yes. And I just wanted to point out that the mayor's reluctancy was based on something he thought had happened that in fact did not happen. And I think that influenced the vote on that day. If you take that reservation away, the conversation could have went in a much different direction. More about the minutes, but when we get to that item, kind of hit the start over button, I think we can go down that road when we get to that item on today's agenda.
Okay, Counsel? He's asking for a change to be put into the minutes.
I don't understand why. I'm sorry, I know that you explained it, but I still do not understand the reasoning. So you're going to have to try again.
Yeah, if you could break it down in layman's terms a little better, what we're actually trying to change, because I'm kind of not understanding it either.
Okay, maybe. No, I caused enough confusion at the last meeting. Let's have Anthony do it.
Thank you.
Here's my understanding, and based on the last meeting, there was a discussion regarding the advertisement of the medical marijuana ordinance. I mentioned during the meeting that for that particular ordinance, it has to be advertised in the newspaper twice, once before first reading and once before second reading. We were handling the first reading. I made that comment. We all assumed that advertisement was published. The mayor expressed concern about some proposed changes from Councilman Morrison because the ordinance had been advertised for first reading, but it was not. But what my understanding is, the councilman would like the minutes to reflect what was actually said at the council meeting, nothing more, because that's all you can address with minutes is what was actually said and discussed. We can't ad lib for the prior meeting. So that's the request.
However, I believe that the discussion that we had was a very good discussion, and I really think that would not have changed the way that the discussion continued. And just my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, you could be exactly correct, but we never got to that point. The question is whether or not you would like the minutes to reflect the discussion that actually occurred, not how the outcome could have changed. I mean, that's for discussion perhaps this evening when you take the ordinance back up. Doesn't reflect what actually occurred at the last meeting.
Yes.
Okay, I'd just like to say I'm against having additional locations for dispensaries in the city beside what we had initially set off to in this ordinance 042018. That's basically, nothing's changed in my point of view is what I'm saying.
And during our last meeting, our discussion on this was you were wanting to change an ordinance basically drastically, is what my opinion was. By doing, instead of just in the one zone, you were wanting to make it wide open. And when it come down to the advertising, I had no idea whether it was advertised or not. I assume it is. I assume all this stuff gets advertised like it's supposed to be. I don't run in and check and check and check. But that's their job to make sure, and then it's Anthony's job to make sure that everything falls in order. What I was saying was that I was not in agreement to changing that ordinance that night as it was written. I was in favor of the way it was written, and then you were wanting to change it to all the zones, C1, C2, and all that, and I would not support an ordinance change of that big of a nature without having a new reading and have it being that way presented, because everybody looks online and goes on and reads this beforehand, and then we come in and pull off a whole different thing. That's where I said the bait and switch deal. I didn't mean we were bait and switch. I meant that's what people get intent. Oh, you're just going to get us in there and then switch everything around. So I will say my opinion again when we get back to the first reading again tonight. So I think you took it out of context of what I was really meaning, what I said.
The way you explain that is consistent with the way I feel. And I agreed with your logic at that time and understood it. I was willing to take a little bit more risk. I don't think tonight, this is simply a historical account. If any of the council disagrees that happened, I think that would be a valid reason to not second this motion. But I think you've heard from our city manager, our city attorney, And I believe that our city clerk could have an opportunity as well, or whoever, that did in fact happen. And I feel that no matter how the outcome could have went as ad lib or predicting the future, that's irrelevant to this conversation. We'll get to that in the discussion item. If what I am actually requesting to go in did happen, I don't see a valid reason why you wouldn't second this. I think it's a critical piece of information that Mayor Hogue expressed for some valid reasons. And I clarified with the city manager again, who said, I think we just do it for the second reading, and where our city attorney said, no, we need to do it for first and second reading. And from that, we all went away saying, oh, we've ran an ad, we've spent X amount of dollars into the community, let's back off this. That happened, and if any of the council disagrees that that did not happen, that's a different argument. But the fact that it happened is, and I think that it's important, is what I'm really requesting to be added to the minutes.
Mayor, I guess I understand it, but my version is that indeed the city clerk records the decisions, not necessarily the discussions of who said what, when, and how. It's really the facts and the decisions that's made. And that, no matter what we think, it isn't going to change the decision, is it?
No,
I don't think so.
no.
Yeah.
No. We got to bring it up again. It's got to come back up
Yeah,
again, so. see what
because
happens.
it was not properly advertised. It shows up on another item tonight that we'll discuss it, and perhaps the decision will be different. But the facts that happened that night, and that's what is recorded, not who said what, just what decisions were actually made, and that's a decision that was actually made from my view.
I agree.
Okay, so we're against this because we don't want to rewrite history the way it actually happened. I don't think I'm losing the integrity at all. We can document, and Anthony, please correct me if I'm wrong here. We have the liberty under sunshine law to write really whatever we want in the minutes. There's certainly a minimum, to Councilmember Randall's point. But if Mia wanted to go over there and type verbatim, she certainly could, right? I mean, that's okay. There's a minimum threshold. And I think that if we're going to go to the extent of talking about reports and all the things that we do, and we put all that in here, and you can see where there's lots of information in these minutes that doesn't necessarily describe the outcome. Mia adds, I think, does a great job of putting in the substantial information. And if we don't think that this was substantial, I mean, if you go back and watch this video, which I watched today, you can clearly see that was a serious shift in my mood from the valid point our mayor made and the confirmation of staff. But if this council wants to just simply not second what I think is a very benign motion, just to make sure that history did grab that very critical piece, find that a bit concerning, but we shall move forward. So.
Wes, what would you like to be added to it? It's not a correction, but for clarification, I see them, and I think Andrea has something about
Angela.
clarification of what she's thinking about also.
Yep. Well, thank you. Again, what I opened with was that the mayor was, please correct me if I'm wrong, Mayor, expressed his concern that we had already invested in a published ad. I confirmed whether or not that happened with our staff, and they confirmed it to be true. That's all I want. We ran an ad, says the mayor. Councilmember Morrison says, did we run an ad? Staff says, yes, we did. That's what I would like.
Those are the facts.
I watched the recording today. That's the facts the way I see them. Does anyone here on staff disagree that on this council not remember that happening? I think the mayor expressed, I think we're in agreement. No, that's what
Could the
happened.
words be put in there as described, but it says an additional part of the conversation? We normally don't add about the conversation. was it, I don't know, it's, Anthony, you're the attorney, bring us out of this hole.
Okay, Florida law only requires that you have a minimum amount of information in your minutes. Okay, the count, so the minimum amount is simply the items that's addressed, the agenda item, and typically the minutes reflect motions that were made, and the final outcome. The clerk and the council aren't under any legal obligation to put discussion, specific discussion in the minutes, because the minutes only have to be a summary. Keep having the essence, which I just explained. Typically, so that's it. So if the council wants to add additional discussion that actually occurred, a historical account of a previous meeting in the minutes, that's a decision that the council can make. And you can add whatever discussion you want in the minutes, or you don't have to add any additional discussion. It's the council's prerogative. It's your minutes. No matter what you put in the minutes, it's not going to change the actual tape recording, that what actually occurred, all the discussion at a council meeting. That information is maintained as well. Again, the minutes are only supposed to be a very general summary of what transpired.
And if I could just echo those final statements, I've cited including myself, 4 people that said something. Myself, Mayor Hogue, David Green, our city manager, Anthony, our city attorney. Have I said anything that did not represent what you said that would be inaccurate? If anyone disagrees with the validity of that context, I would appreciate it to help the council understand I'm not making history up here.
I don't have a problem with it personally, because I said what I said, and I remember what I said, and I know why I said it, and I know how I said it. And I was just defending something, put it in lay terms, that we already had out there for public. And changing it without due notification is wrong, and I will stand behind that from here on. Not that I have a problem with what you want to do, because what you want to do, I see no harm in me, because I said exactly what you said I said.
Thank
Nothing
you.
more, nothing less, but I don't have a problem. It's up to the council.
Can we move to approve the minutes as they're written?
Yes?
I so moved.
We have a motion to accept the minutes as written. Have a second?
Mayor, I would second that motion.
We have a
It based on the fact that it meets the criteria of why we have minutes. We don't read minds, we can't understand what somebody meant or thought they said.
Do we need to do all 3 at once, or just one at a time? Do you want to do them all 3 at one time, or one at a time?
All 3?
They pulled 3 items.
No.
No, we want the items that have been pulled have to be voted on separately now.
Do one separately, right?
Correct.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and vote on accepting the minutes as written. Call the roll.
Is it okay if I ask a clarifying statement? So when council member Raymond emails a clarification on her son or her grandson was stated to, in her reports, do, I believe, a haiku in her poem. She was sharing some cool stories. She clarified that it was not her grandson that said the haiku, that she said the haiku. And that clarification of the minutes came in to Mia. Did those get changed?
Not yet.
Okay. Got it. Because I think I've
The
seen,
deal, but it's
yeah, just making sure we're talking about some very different things here. And if I understand correctly, the minutes have not been corrected on that request. It's still.
For clarification, we have a set of minutes ready to go if they are approved for signature, for time's sake.
Okay, but a motion and a second was not made to approve what Councilmember Raymond put in?
Correct.
Okay, what do
That-
we do with that?
The email that I sent out, I think it was last week, simply stated, and it's been done historically, where if it's an item that is not critical and council's not passing any kind of legislation or action, but simply clarifying something in the reports. In the past, in your email, I showed an example of how ahead of time, mayor can say, there's a correction that needs to be made to the minutes, and he can say whatever he wants to about the minutes, but then the council can come to consensus on that before anything's pulled as a clean way of, taking care of that piece of business.
So then
Up
what
to
you're,
council.
yeah, so what you're saying then, if it's a council action item, it requires a different level of action and approval.
That's what I've seen historically in the minutes.
Okay, thank
Okay,
you.
we're down to calling the roll on the approval of the minutes as written. Call the roll, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown,
4.
Mayor Hogue,
4.
Councilmember Morrison,
Against.
Councilmember Randalls,
Approval for the minutes as written.
Councilmember Raymond.
Or,
Okay, item
Number 4.
number 4, was it?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 4, resolution number 2018-4, dogs in parks. First of all, I just want to thank the staff. We spent quite a bit of time on this one. We were working through it, so thank you, Josh and David very much, and Anthony as well, and Mia for working through everything from interpretation issues to understanding where we are today. This can be exciting for some. I think it's going to be a great thing for our city, and I just need some clarification in regards to this particular resolution that we put on the consent agenda. First was, what was the, just trying to understand the logic on why it went on the consent agenda? Was this something that this council was already in favor for? And I'll ask the council now, are we all on board for this and okay? Because I do have some questions myself, but just curious.
I'm on board with it. I don't have a
Okay.
problem with it. I do have some things I want to talk about.
Yeah, I do too.
Okay.
When we get to it.
Got it. First question for me is on the interpretation. There was a lot of back and forth, and the words like conflict being used. And I think I saw. I'd like to give either David or Anthony or any staff who'd like to clarify what was the final decision and understanding when it comes to interpreting the rules, because it sounded like when I read Josh's, I believe Josh did the cover sheet, that if you read kind of the very nice job he did in the chronological flow, it gets to a point in there where it says, it was brought, if you don't mind, go to the next page, please. Thank you. This is so nice, having this fancy monitor here. It says, it has come to the attention of the staff that an action to allow leash dogs in city parks using chapters 54, 24 can be viewed as in conflict. Can staff explain to me really what that conflict was and really how that's viewed?
Well, I think realistically, the city attorney made it clear to staff that you read the two sections in concert. So, one, the city manager and staff can promulgate rules and regulations for the park, but when it comes to the dog issue, as you well know, that requires a resolution. And so that's what was done in this case. Yes, Wes, you are the one that raised the question.
Okay, so my question is, do we read it that there is some order here, that we've got a word called designation, and then we've got a word that's promulgation, to distribute, to announce. So you can designate the law and then you can promulgate. And Anthony, help me out here if I get off track. There's a logical order there, right? You can't promulgate unless you designate, right? You have to have designation before you have promulgation.
Well, I look at it from this standpoint, very basic standpoint. All the laws in the land in the United States of America, including all of our Cape Canaveral ordinances, have to be read in paramateria, which means they have to be read in total. In this particular case, we have two sections of the code, 1 and 54, that simply says if there will be animals in the park, they have to be authorized by the council by resolution. Then we got a more expansive section in Chapter 54 that establishes the city's ability, city manager, city council, whomever has the authority to promulgate rules. So looking at the two sections together, it was clear to me, and my advice to staff was, you need to have a resolution to authorize animals in a park. So that has to be brought to the council for consideration. That's how I looked at it, just from that very basic standpoint. There was apparently there was a trial period where dogs were allowed in the park. I was advised by staff that there, and my knowledge, there hasn't been a resolution authorizing it. So I simply advised, you need a resolution brought to the council so the council can give its blessing regarding this activity. And if the council decides they do not want to allow dogs in the park, that's your prerogative, council. You're the policymakers. Don't adopt a resolution, and then there will be no dogs in the park pursuant to that city code provision in chapter 14. So I looked at it just, again, looking at the laws, the two laws together, trying to make sense out of them. And it was clear to me that the council has to adopt a resolution to allow animals in the park. That's simple, in my mind. Before they can promulgate rules.
Thank you. So there is a logical order.
Yes.
I came in with some questions, and the word conflict was used, and I actually agree with staff that there is no conflict, that it is complementary, if I understand you correct, that there's a designation made, and then after that designation, now the city manager has a lot of powers. He can buy signs, and staff can get creative on how to best administer this law through and promulgate it with a lot of authorities. And Section 54 describes that he can adopt administrative and supplemental rules within that power to really, he's a property manager. He doesn't need to go to council. It's an efficiency gain. I understand that and respect it, that if he had to come to us every time we needed to print a sign, that makes sense. And I'm very happy to hear that there is an agreement that there was a logical order there. And the question is today, would we, if dogs on the beach, it's a discussion item. It's very early today, very different than this, but could the city manager, the way this law reads today, and staff make a decision to run another trial period on beaches before anything was designated?
He wouldn't do that. And if we really want to drill this all the way down to the bottom line, I didn't make this decision. I wasn't here then, but I supported it when I returned back to work. I was actually on family medical leave. So I think a lot of this is rather unnecessary in my viewpoint, and much ado about much of nothing. The city council historically has been supportive of the idea of dogs in the parks. We had the Fido's Day, and the staff at the time, and again, I own it, made the decision that the recommendation or the vote for a trial period for the dogs in the parks that was approved by the Culture and Leisure Services Board. The thing that was not done at the time was a resolution was not done. I can't second guess that, nor would I. The only thing I would say is that hindsight provides certain additional illumination on any sort of subject, but I would never sit here and say they were wrong. I would just say that we're clarifying an issue and hopefully putting it to bed. I see the beach issue much differently. And to the extent that the council wants me to get involved in the policy discussion when we get to dogs on the beach, I may or may not have a lot to say. But I'm not going to stick my nose into council policy.
Thank you. So it sounds like you have willing and able. You do agree that it certainly sounds like you're not willing to test or do a trial period. But the more important thing that I'm trying to understand is, do we agree that you're not able to as well, that we understand the law consistently?
Wes, I think, that I have decent credentials. I've actually been to school for what I do for a living and a number of years' experience. I wasn't here then, so I don't know what all the discussion was. All I'm saying right now is I'm city manager. It happened during the period that I was city manager, and I'm responsible for it. And you guys have the choice of cleaning it up or not. And I don't know what more we can say, sir.
Nothing needed. Thank you. Anthony, does he have the authority to test a beach program if he wanted to? And it's not about David. It's about really, did the 2014 ordinances give our city manager the authority to test or to do a trial period before a resolution was
Well, I want
designated?
to clarify maybe what you're saying. With respect to animals, there needs to be a resolution authorizing persons to bring animals in city parks. Okay? Now, as you mentioned, this really is a city property management issue. This is property that's owned by and controlled by the city. Chapter 54 allows the city manager to establish a whole bunch of rules and regulations pertaining to parks that do not require city council approval. But on the narrow issue of animals, whether they're authorized, needs to come here first.
Okay.
Is
so
that?
It's 100% consistent, and I just want to get either a firm yes or no on the city manager does not have the ability to run a trial period like happened here for beaches? Or does he have the ability in regards to animals?
With respect to animals?
Yes.
I would advise that it would have to first be approved by the city council, not just the city manager.
Okay. And the same application would apply with dogs. The water under the bridge, it's behind us. I can respect that and understand moving forward. In knowing that, I would like to make some requests. I had to firm that up, and thank you for wrestling through that with me. In this resolution, it describes at the beginning, so we're at the resolution, if you want to take us there. It says, I think the first stanza makes a lot of sense. I love the logic and order of that, but when you read into the second, it talks about, where does it get into? Anywhere it mentions a trial period, I don't think this council would want to support a resolution that was justified off of an action that was not following the ordinances of this city. I think that's a bit sloppy, not in any integrity on our part to let that come across. It's our desk to be prudent and to not let these things get through the cracks. If it doesn't lose the integrity, you will not hear an argument from me. People, I agree with our community engagement who works hard, and from a lot of people are very happy about leash dogs on parks. That's not the issue here today. It's more about the accuracy is there, but I don't know why we would say, mention a trial period within this section when in fact that was a bit of a misstep in my opinion. And so I'll leave that right there, and I do have a couple other small changes.
Is what you're trying to say, Mr. Morrison, since there was a trial period for the city parks, you want a trial period for the beach? Is that what you're actually trying to get to?
No, I simply confirmed that trial period should not happen before resolution. Tonight, we're voting on a resolution. The city did a trial period. This resolution talks about doing a trial period. In effect, and to put it in common man's terms, the city tested the law. We can't test the law. the city manager, can't say, hey, I'm going to go test dogs on the beach today for a 1-year program if Culture and Leisure Services says that. And we've worked through that, and that's water under the bridge. City manager can't say, whereas the smokers of the city want to smoke cigarettes while they read books in the library as long as they have an ashtray next to a window. He can't do those. Those are things against the law. So in this resolution, it talks about there was a test, there was a trial period, and that trial period was a bit out of order, and I think it would be messy and foolish for us to put that in our exciting resolution that, hey, dogs are going to go into parks. I don't think it's necessary, and I'd like to pull it out. That's history.
Well, that can be taken out.
I mean, that information can be taken out.
Thank
I
you.
mean, the recitals were, if the council desires, I mean, it was drafted quickly to try to get this on the agenda item, and it's a factual account of what happened.
Thank you.
So if the council doesn't want reference to trial study, you can remove it from the third recital. We can even strike it in its entirety, and you can strike trial study period reference in the last recital as well. And that can just be rewritten to say that city staff is recommending and the council desires to allow the dogs in the park. I mean, that can be accomplished if that's what the council wants to do. Just so there's no misunderstanding, since we're talking about trial periods, if the city council wanted to authorize a trial period in the parks or in the beaches with respect to any animals, council can do that. And they can direct the manager to implement that at any time. I just want to make sure that there's no presumption that trial periods are not permissible.
And if that's something the city council wants to tell me to do tonight, I'll be glad to move forward with that. And I think staff would too. And I think under the rules and regulations, and we would work with the city attorney, we could certainly impose some conditions and stipulations that would occur during the trial period, like limited hours and those kinds of things. And because, we're the tennis ball here, and we're constantly getting bounced around and hit and fouled upon, I guess, and all those other good things too. But I mean, if the council wants to do that, that's certainly something we could do. As to the beach, the dog in the park has been successful. And, there was the trial period, I admit, shouldn't say that, my bad. But the FIDO days and some participating vendors and BCSO demonstrations, I think, and those kinds of things. But one of the things that we staff constantly hear is both pro and con on dogs on the beach, dogs in the parks we used to. And I think if the council wants dogs in the park, certainly pass the resolution as amended. And if you later on in the evening or now decide that you want to try something else on the beach, we'll do what we're told. We're hired help.
Wow. Mayor, I'd like to bring us back to the real subject here. The situation, and I was going to comment afterwards that
Rocky,
whoever prepared this, can I
Let
speak?
me see if he's through.
I'm sorry.
Is Mr. Morrison done?
I did have just.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. Dave, you're not hired help. You're valued, and we appreciate you. There's a typo, easy stuff. It says, or I'm reading it wrong. In the second stanza, as well as for there and there. That doesn't read right to me.
First one should be THERE. Is that what you're saying?
Does that read right to?
But as well as for their and their dog's general health and well-being.
Is that right?
For there.
Yeah.
For there and there? Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
the
let's
people and their
there and there
dogs.
away.
Yeah. That's right. It
Got
should
it. And
A little awkward, but it's grammatically correct.
that was it. Well, specifying when the trial date started. Do we know the date, Josh or State? Was it the 28th?
I'm thinking it was like the 23rd or 25th? Okay.
If it's convenient. That's all the comments I had. Thank you.
Mr. Randalls.
Wow. Okay, forgive me for interrupting previously, but the real question that we were looking to discuss here, our city ordinance in 1981 stated, the council did, and I guess I was here along with Mayor Hogue at this time, and because the residents asked us to come up with an ordinance, and it was in 1981, and it's section 14-28, and it's in our package. And it says, animals prohibited in parks and beaches. It simply says, no animal shall be allowed in any public park, and it goes on to about the beach. And any animal found in a park or on a beach not designated shall be deemed in violation of the article. At that time, that's been some time ago, but that is really the item that we're discussing and trying to correct, if I understand it. Maybe we didn't get permission from everybody to trial the trial period, but our vision here in Cape Canaveral has been that we want to be a community and try to listen to the residents, and that's been the city's vision statement for some time. And in fact, one of our advisory boards, which many of you serve on advisory boards, came up with a Cultural and Leisure Services Board, and they had a recommendation to allow leashed, L-E-A-S-H-E-D, dogs in parks. And that was one of our boards. And they made the motion and inquired about it and decided that kind of whether it was a public opinion or what, but the board suggested that we had a day at Manatee Park where people could bring their dogs. On leash, of course. They had to be in control of them. It seemed to work out. People liked it. I don't know what it was called. What was it called?
Fido Day, I think it was.
Okay, Fido in the park. It gave the people to exercise their dogs out there, and based upon that, we became in conflict with our ordinance of 1981 because at that time we didn't want any dogs. So what we're attempting to do tonight is to say we've gone through a test, which probably sounds like a bad word. We did that, the FUSE National Dog Day. We've done that. There was a list of all the locations. Whoever prepared this, and I understand Josh did, I'd really like to say we get 8 or 10 of these agenda, I'm deviating, 8 or 10 agenda packets every meeting. And this preparation is probably one of the most complete items I've seen. Every time I read through it, I found the answer that I wanted, or found the answer that was here available. It lists all 9 locations where we decided we're going to address this. It talks about the chapter that says we cannot have animals in the park. It talks about the recommendation. It's from the board here, the Culture and Leisure Services. It just goes step by step and is well prepared, I thought. It gets to the point to where it comes into a conflict with, we had a resolution, and it's very clear that it says, if you want to, you have to pass a resolution. And that is what we're attempting to do tonight. It says, such designation shall be by resolution adopted by the City Council. Parks and beach areas so designated shall be properly identified and posted. We followed that. It seems like we shouldn't have had a trial period and asked for public input. But someplace along the line, we have the authority as council to make changes that's whatever 18 is, 81, probably 40 years ago, almost 35 years ago. There seems to be people love their animals, they take them as children, as their family, and they want to walk them. And that's what we did, the people liked it, and that's what we're trying to do is change the resolution and say, yes, we can have park dogs in the park on a leash if the owner controls them. That's kind of the nuts and bolts of it. And I don't know about all the other things, but everything goes along here, and that was our main discussion tonight, is do we want to allow parks by resolution? do we want to allow dogs in parks by resolution? And that's about the only thing we got on the agenda here on this whole thing. Josh, thank you for preparing it. If you did that, that followed everything that we should do to get the answer. But yeah, we probably. Huh?
I just wrote down what happened, but something that you said that we did the trial period without public input. Do you mean city council meeting public input, or do you mean asking the community if they wanted dogs in parks? Because the trial and the vote and Fido Field Day all came from 2 years of doing community engagement. So as you all know, since 1981, the No Dogs in Parks, but since my first ever city event as basically a staff member was Founders Day in 2016. And all anyone asked was, can I bring my dog to the park? So since 2016, my first ever event, they've been asking me up until we tried it. So there was public input. It wasn't at a city council meeting, again, the resolution, the order, but there was public input, and that's why it went before Culture and Leisure Services, and that's why we're here now.
If we missed a step and took 2 steps at once, but the point is, we have a resolution in front of us, and do we really want to adopt it? Mayor?
Hey, Angela, do you have anything you want to bring
All
in?
I have to say about this is that I think that the trial period that was put forth by Culture and Leisures was an important step because it proved that it was working out for everyone's benefit. And I thought that part was important just to make sure. I mean, it's the city staff and the Parks Department and Public Works that take care of monitoring these situations and picking up in case someone doesn't pick up after their dog. So I do think that trial period is very important. And Culture and Leisure Services, I know for a fact, worked very hard on it. And I think that it should be included, and I would so move that we adopt this resolution the way it's written. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Brown?
Yeah, I have no issues with the resolution. Only thing I would ask, as a person that is at Manatee Park every day, I would ask that the city put some larger signs up there reference to dogs being on tight or short leashes and picking up behind your animals. I think there's one sign out there in Manatee Park I would move, or like to have more than one sign than at the entrance, because there are people that rules aren't for the good people, they're for the people that don't want to abide by them, and I would ask that we put more signs out.
Okay, I'm going to just put my 2 cents. I don't have a problem with this at all. I think it's just something that people in the city want, so what people want, the largest majority gets my vote on things that I think are going to bring the city together. My only concern with this was the short leash is not here. I see these yo-yo leashes in the parks, and I've witnessed at Friday Fest 2 people stumbling and falling on them. People tend to get together and have a camaraderie, and that's what Friday Fest is all about, is to get the neighbors together there, but they tend to not pay attention to where their dog's going, and people are walking along talking and they stumble. I saw last Friday, 2 people fall. And I don't know how many in Manatee trip, but I think that we should have on this thing, instead of just they're on a leash, they need to be on a short, no more than 6 foot long leash.
So with the implementation rules and regulations, we could have a maximum leash length.
Says on a leash, and I think it's
And
just
we could not allow as he called them, the yo-yo leashes. Long day.
That's my only thing I want to add to this thing. I'm all for it. I think it's a good idea. I like dogs. I like animals, and blah blah blah. And I don't have a dog anymore, but I'm all for it. So I don't have a problem with it. It had been a long time ago.
So school me here on a little Robert's Rules of Order. You've heard quite a few requests. The motion that I wanted was to add in the date, to take out any activity that I think staff agrees was out of order. And do we handle them all at once, or do we want to do one at a time?
What's that? The things that were added or changed?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't have a problem with how you want to do it, but adding just a 6 foot on a leash, it says on leash, and I think it needs to be clarified.
Defining it,
You
yeah.
could have a 50-yard lease, or you can have a 100-yard, or
No, Mayor, I think his question is, he
Not a major
proposed.
change.
I think you made a motion, if I remember
Correct.
correctly, to modify the resolution in a couple of areas. I have heard other council members, I believe, say they were fine with it the way it is. So I think at this point, Anthony, and I don't want to get in the middle.
Well, there hasn't been a
and-
second to either
Yeah. So
motion,
I
so
think
it's
we need.
still on the floor for discussion.
Yeah, we need a motion and a second that's supportable by at least three.
We had a motion from Angela as a motion, but I don't know what her motion was made before I said what I
I'm
said.
going
It
to
was
with-
not
I'm
seconded.
going to withdraw that because if we're going to put in extra things like the 6-foot leash and
No,
then we
no,
have to.
no,
we
that's
have to-
not necessary. That could be part of the implementing rules and regulations that we would do. So the only issue before the city council tonight, and I want to be sure I get this right, is do you want to adopt this resolution or do you want to adopt it as Wes, Councilmember Morrison proposed to modify it? That's the question.
Yeah, if she's pulled her motion back, then
what you're
I just want to clarify that you understand,
Yes.
Councilmember Raymond, what I'm proposing, because I don't think you do.
Yes, I do.
I-
Thank you. I understand very well.
I don't think we're disagreeing that a trial period is a good idea. But what I'm saying is a trial period was done out of order and it did not follow the ordinances of this city. And it's no different than saying we trialed another animal. You know, we tested rattlesnakes in City Hall today. I mean, you know, and from that reason, it's like, whoa, you did what? No, and there's no integrity. We're all for dogs on beaches. I think we've heard some good ideas out today, and I'm just trying to pull that out. So if you understand, fine, and I'll make my motion to add in to add in the date in January and to pull out any language as it pertains to a trial period.
My problem with it is that the trial period happened. It's a fact that this happened. So I don't think it's a terrible thing because it was the reality of what actually happened. Anthony, help us here.
Can I have one comment? The minutes I said earlier that I wanted adoption happen, you heard every person who I quoted said it happened. You had a problem seconding that, but this is different. So either way, yes, please help if she needs it.
The resolution, the recitals in the resolution, the whereas clauses, are indeed a factual account of what happened as staff indicated to me. Okay, now you're talking about a resolution versus minutes. There's a major distinction between the two, so I wouldn't get confused about that or clouded by it. Do you want the factual account or not? As I understand Councilman Morrison on this, he would like to add the date that the trial study actually commenced. But I'm a little bit puzzled by how do we insert the date that the trial study commenced and then remove the trial study language? So you're asking that the date be put in there, that it started in the third, that's how I understood your comment. I would probably want, if the council wanted to add the date in there and remove trial study, I would like clarification on that, so when I go back and draft this, it makes sense.
I think we learned something. We have council approval before we do anything, seems like. But, Wes, are you just wanting to put a date that they did the trial starting? You've had several things you've talked about, but what are you actually?
Just to add the date, pull out the trial, I agree with the attorney, and that's why he's on our team, thank you. Taking the date out would require a wordsmith, so I would say remove the date and remove any, I'd like to make a motion to remove the date and remove any language regarding a trial study.
Well, how would you propose to say you were in favor of something if you didn't know that it went through a trial? But I know where you're at, but I'm just trying
Well,
to.
because the ordinances does not require us to go through a trial. A resolution doesn't require a trial. A trial requires probably.
You
the
can make a
consent-
resolution with a trial period.
Yep.
You can do exactly what we have written here.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't want to do something like that without a trial period, which they did do, but they should have brought the resolution here first.
Okay.
That's your point, I think is what I'm getting.
Well, we've been, 3 or 4 months into this, and it's. I've made my motion. I'd like to keep moving along, and I was trying to keep it clean and do a good job as a policymaker, and to make sure that it had some integrity to it and represented a nice resolution.
Okay, I'll bring this to an
That's it.
end. I'll
Thank you.
second your motion, just for the sake of seconding it, to get this thing rolling. And would you call the roll, please?
Mayor Pro Tem Brown,
Against.
Mayor Hogue,
I'll have to vote for it. I've made the motion to accept it.
Councilmember Morrison,
4.
Councilmember Randalls,
For the motion to accept.
Councilmember Raymond,
Against.
Okay, council or staff, from now on, when you got a resolution, or you want to change something of a nature that's in the ordinances, please bring the resolution here first, and it'll curtail all this. Mr. Morrison, thank you for bringing that to the attention of it. And let's move on. I think we had just 2 items you pulled. Items 4. We do have one card. I'd like to ask council if they would like to kind of step out of order here. We have somebody would like to speak on what we just passed. It's not normal procedure, but the lady, do we have concurrency? Somebody wants to talk about dogs in the park.
What, you mean
Yeah,
dogs in the park?
we're going out of order by doing this. If you care to do this, we can do it. Otherwise, we just
No.
go on.
It's fine.
Fines what?
No, that's okay. I don't have anything
Let
to
the
say
party
about
speak?
dogs.
Okay. You got 3 minutes, man. Come on up. This should have been beforehand. We appreciate it.
I love dogs. Let's establish that right from the beginning. I'm Andrea. Live on Orange Avenue. My concern really deals from the city's perspective, and that is the liability issue if somebody gets hurt because they've tripped over a dog leash or another reason, and who is going to be policing this? And are we going to add on extra staff, police, to police this? Who's going to be monitoring this? Is this going to be falling on the people who live near the park, and now they're going to be calling the local sheriff precinct and saying, hey, somebody's out there with their dog, and their dog's not on a leash? I personally, if I were on the board, I would see this as a Pandora's box. You're opening yourself up to liability. You're opening yourself up to the question of how is this going to be monitored? Not everybody takes care of their dogs like you or I would. We've seen that many, many times. So I just want to call that to your attention. It's a concern of mine. I think it ought to be a concern of the council. The liability issue, our city attorney might be able to address that. What if somebody sues the city because they were injured on a city park, city property, because somebody's dog was maybe leashed or unleashed, whatever? I don't know that you'd want to have to deal with that. Anyway, thank you for your time.
I had a question real quick. So basically, you're against dogs in the park? Is that what you're saying?
I think the city needs to take a closer look at what their liability is with regard to animals on any public property, any city property, whether it's the beach, whether it's the park, whether it's a pedway, whatever. Once the city agrees that they're going to do this, the city becomes responsible and liable for any damages or injuries that might be incurred. That's my point.
I'm gonna tell you the way I feel, Andrea. I don't mind the dogs in the park, but I'm gonna tell you, I go to Friday Fest. I enjoy it. It's one of our bigger events that I enjoy seeing the people. And I see somebody with a leash that is not a tight leash. I am going to go to our staff people who are there And those people will tell those people they have to leave, and if they don't observe the rules, then this is coming back to council, and it will be stricken from the records as being allowed, in my opinion. That's the way
Right.
that I will
Right.
see that it gets enforced.
Who's going to police the length of a leash?
I think it should be no more than 6 feet, just like the rule says.
I understand, and I agree with
that's going to be
you.
up to, if somebody comes in with a yo-yo leash, right away, you know that leash is not 6 foot.
Who's going to police
We
it?
got staff people that are there, and the
At
sheriff's
the
office is
parks,
there all the time.
24 hours a day?
In the parks.
That's my
I don't
point.
know.
That's my point.
That's another story.
And it's a story that needs to be
I understand.
examined.
I think, and I agree with Pandora's box, because we're going to get into another one tonight. That's another bigger Pandora's box. But
Okay.
it's something that, I think if it gets abused on the beach, because the sheriff's office does patrol that beach pretty regular, and they'll know what the rules are, and if it gets abused, we'll just squash the whole thing,
Yeah.
period.
I think this needs to be examined.
I know, I agree with you.
Before you make any kind of
But
decision
there
on
are,
this.
it's a 50-50 thing in this city, I think. Like the peacocks, if you remember the peacock issues. We were going to have a peacock committee, they're going to control it, nobody controlled it. So let's see how this works. They got a time to work on it.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your concern. All right, we're through the consent agenda, or we passed the two that you pulled, correct? We went through those. Okay, we're into the public hearings. This is ordinance 03, 2018, second reading.
Okay, ordinance number 03-2018, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Cape Canaveral, Brevard County, Florida, amending section 110-372 of the city code, providing for a 20-foot minimum townhouse unit width, increasing the minimum lot widths, and adjusting the minimum lot areas accordingly, establishing provisions governing non-conforming townhouse structures and lots, providing relief for multiple family and two-family dwellings existing prior to October 4, 1988, which were built in accordance with townhouse standards from certain minimum lot width and setback requirements, providing for the repeal of prior inconsistent ordinances and resolutions, incorporation into the code severability, and an effective date. As I noted, this is second and final reading. We had a rather extensive discussion regarding this ordinance. At the last meeting, there have been no changes to this ordinance since the council passed it on first reading. The only thing now required is a public hearing where the public would have an opportunity to provide comments. Other than that, I'd be happy to answer any additional questions you may have regarding the ordinance. Mayor.
Okay, sir. Council, it's here first. We've been through this a couple times. I don't have anything to add to it. Mr. Randalls, you looking?
I
good?
don't, Mayor. I've reviewed it against the first one and found no changes to the one we passed first public hearing.
Morrison.
Yep, thank you. I expressed my desire at the last meeting, and it was to separate the issues. I felt like there were two dramatically different issues. One of them was somebody was waiting on us, and I felt like we were in the way, and it allowed a conversion, and I had requested a strike through in the ordinance, and then to take that second part over and to look at that and spend a little bit more time on it. I think it was a complicated issue. I feel the same today on it. They're totally different issues. The Planning and Zoning Board did not unanimously support this. I think one of the members was absent, which he was one who would have probably voted for it. And then one of them was very hesitant, tried to actually abstain from the vote. So it was a 2.5 hours, a 3-hour meeting. And I just wanted to express that by the time it gets to us, it's a complicated issue. They wrestled with it. We talked about it. It was not an easy win. And my goal was to separate it and to say, hey, guys, can we slow down on this part? Can we talk about it? Because I don't know why we're at a 20-foot minimum for a home. We've never had that. And I just wanted to clarify in this summary, I think Councilmember Randalls, you said that we've always had minimum home widths, but we have not. There was a typo in the summary where it says ordinance require, right there in the second line, In the second paragraph, historically, townhouse lots would be a minimum of 16 foot in width. In 1988, the ordinance 988 was adopted, which increased the minimum width of a townhouse to 20 feet. I think it meant to say a town lot to 20 feet. David and I worked through that. I want to make it very clear that we have 8-foot setbacks. We have 20-foot lots. This ordinance is expanding the lots so that we can force in a 20-foot wide home. Property values were brought up by Mayor Pro Tem Brown. And for the record, I live in a 16.5-foot wide home. It's roughly 2,000 square feet. It's beautiful. I do jumping jacks with my wife. I don't run into anybody. My hallways, I can pass by her in the hallway. Everything's fine. My property value is doing just fine. There's very little to no arguments to say that 20-foot wide homes are increased in values. In fact, the trends today is people are moving to smaller spaces using more disposable income. I don't know why we're getting wrapped around the axle and initiating our force. We have the authority to, but we have to ask ourselves, is this the right thing to do? I'm all for the conversions. I don't want to hold anyone back on non-conforming. I think that that's good. But when we say we are the government, which is really just 5 people up here who were raised like normal individuals every day, Angela, Rocky, me, Mike, and Bob. We were kids and we grew up with our families, and 20-foot, the width of a home wasn't ever an issue. I was raised that if you leave people alone, it's your property, you do what you want with it. It's our God-given right to have our property. You have your 8-foot setbacks, and you live in whatever you need. And something happened to us. Something says, but we need to have this minimum standard. And words like "it's not appropriate" was used. Words like "not very comfortable." It is undesirable. I'm hearing this, and I'm in the 16-foot wide home. How do you think that makes me feel? You know, we call kids who get taught into school, or, teachers teaching kids, we call that a school, right? Those are called students and teachers. A place where those types of activities happen, that's a school. A place where we go sit down and eat is called a restaurant. And now I'm learning that if you live anything less than a 20-foot home, it's called undesirable, inappropriate, and just not livable, and I find that a bit concerning.
I don't think anybody on the council made those exact words that you're referring to. If you're going to quote people, I'd appreciate if you quote them correctly.
Mr. Mayor, if I'm out of conduct, I'd appreciate to not get interrupted. If you could please, per the ordinance. I'm not quoting any of this, council. I'm quoting staff, and I'm quoting the board member, and I never quoted the council. The issue at hand is what is the big problem with if we have a 28-foot lot and somebody wants to go 8-foot setback and they want to build a 12-foot wide home because they want more green space, because they want a wraparound porch, because they want a pool, because they want a hot tub, because they just don't want a lot of stuff. My wife just went to a trade show. Elder people are liking smaller spaces now. They can get around the house a little bit. The china cabinets, my mom, she has them, all the gadgets, the entertainment centers, they're gone. Our cell phones control what used to fill up a whole room full of stuff and files. We're living in smaller places. And as the whole world is moving towards smaller, Cape Canaveral is saying we want bigger houses on our townhomes. We want 20-foot minimums. And I don't think it's the right thing to do. I think it's the wrong direction, and I think it's a mistake for us to sit here and to say, you know what? Now, I will quote you, Mayor Pro Tem Brown. I think discipline was the word that we used, that people need discipline. And I find that you're telling me as the 16-foot home that I need discipline. And that children don't like discipline, but they need it. And to talk like that into the community is one thing. And then to question I think you said that Wes believes that he's all for these people.
Quote me correctly.
He is not. He says that he's okay with people moving next to him with homes that are so wide. And you said, I just don't believe that. I'm the guy with the house that wide.
Wes, I'm gonna
I'll
bring
close my statement, Mayor. Thank you very much.
I'm gonna just bring. You can talk all night if you want. I'm gonna bring something to your attention. These people that making these decisions are citizens of the city. Don't forget, it's not us. So the people that are making the decisions that you're talking about are people that we supported and put on boards, and they are citizens of the city, and that's what they want. That's what those people are actually sitting there and hearing some of the people that are in their audience. So you go to the boards, you know, those people are just citizens like you and I, and they're telling us up here, the council, what the people want. So if you got an issue with the height or the width or something of city buildings or houses or whatever, you need to take that issue back to the people that make them rules. We don't make the rules up here. We just either approve their recommendation or we deny it. So we're all sitting up here passing things that are considered on a board lower than here and brought to us to approve or not approve. And all those years, and I can very distinctly remember the night they went to 20 foot and the reasons why. And I don't have a problem with 20 foot. I don't have a problem if you live in a 2 foot wide house. I could care less. But the problem is what you are you're bringing issues against something that we haven't created up here. So if you got to, you know, if you want to change these issues, you have to go down to the boards. Up here, we either say yay or nay, and then it has to go back through that process again if we turn it down. And that's my plight to you, is you're talking about something that we have no control over other than just saying no to it or yes to it. Mr. Dickey.
Yeah, I just want to make one comment. I've heard Wes indicate that, government, he doesn't believe government should tell people what to do. The market dictates what happens out there in the city. If somebody wants to build a 12-foot house, 12-foot wide house, if somebody wants to build an 8-foot wide house, we have processes that allow that. If a developer comes to me and says, I want to build 10-foot townhouses, or I want to build a 200-square-foot house, I'd say, well, let's sit down and talk about it. And the process that we have is called a planned development. It's a very flexible zoning district, Wes. So if you know somebody who wants to build 12-foot houses, send them to me. I will react and I will help them make it happen. We're not telling people they can't do anything. That's not what we're telling them. If you know someone who wants to build something outside of the norm, we have a process that allows that to happen.
I don't know where to start with either one of those comments, and I respect them. But board makes recommendations. Anthony, please correct me if I'm wrong.
I said that. I said they recommend to you.
And those, I go to those board meetings.
Yeah, I know you do.
And we're encouraged to not speak at those meetings. And the buck stops right here at this desk.
You can.
And if we do not believe that it is good or bad, which is today what I'm arguing for, I think that this is bad, then we have to vote our conscience and our hearts to say that the people make the rules, the people propose the rules, and none of those people were elected.
What did I tell you, Russ? You're acting like I'm saying something totally different to what you're saying.
But you're saying
I told
they make
you,
the rules.
No, I said they make the recommendations to us.
Okay.
And we either say yay or nay to their recommendations. You have that option tonight to vote no.
Mm-hmm.
I have it to vote no or yes or whatever I want to vote. But I don't, and like you mentioned, we don't speak at those meetings. Those are people that we, the council, have appointed to those boards to make decisions on the recommendations from what they hear from the public, what they feel, they have their opinion, and then they put a ordinance together or whatever together and bring it to us for approval. And that's all we do. We either yay or nay it. We can vote no.
Yeah.
You got your option to do whatever you want.
I think that's one of our roles, Mayor, but we're in the business of drafting policy, debating policy, amending policy, and adopting policy.
Right.
And the final piece of adopting policy is certainly a role that we have. But Dave and I are excited. We're talking about some tiny halls things. I'm getting in the early stage in policy drafting. So that has to cross through the P&Z board to make a recommendation. Yes, Wes, we like this, Dave, whoever was involved or no. So the policy can start with council and it can end with council.
Right.
And I'm saying by the time it gets to us, no matter what direction it comes, ultimately it's our names that are on it. And the people elected us. Those people's names were not on a ballot. They were appointed. And none of this staff they get to celebrate, we built this city, and we get to say, hey, we crafted it, but there's different roles within the process. Our role is to make sure that policy is good, it's fair, it's not immoral, and it makes sense. And in this particular case, Dave's example still reserves the right to say no something through the plan development process. And I can't think of one good reason why you would tell somebody no to that. And for those reasons, the question I would like to ask council today is, what is your problem with a 19-foot wide home? I'm in a 17-foot
I'll tell you, I don't
wide
have a problem with it.
home. Okay.
But there's a problem with 19-foot wide lots.
Okay, we have a 20-foot wide lot that's
That's
passed
the whole
and approved
issue.
today.
That's the whole issue you're bucking here.
Yeah, the
You can
lot
build a
is...
12-foot wide house on that 20-foot wide lot if you want.
That's not the way I read this. Anthony, please correct me if I'm wrong. The days of 12-foot wide homes, townhomes are gone in Cape Canaveral if this passes.
I don't think you're hearing what the man's telling you over there.
Without going through the plan development process, whatever...
Well, all of it
that
goes
is-
through the plan development process. Everything that gets built in this city goes through a plan development process.
This ordinance, it reads that if moving forward for new development, that I have to be on a lot that can fit a 20-foot wide townhome respecting all others, and then the lot dimensions expanded to accommodate that. The way that we got here was historically, we were allowing the intention was they've always wanted 20-foot wide homes. So they said, let's do 20-foot wide lots. And I believe what started happening was, correct me if I'm wrong, due to our subdivision rules, developers started going around the county, re-subdividing. Next thing you know, they were slamming in what normally you could get 3 townhomes, now maybe you get 5, right? And they're doing the math on it, and these ones on the end with an 8-foot setback turn into a 12-foot wide home. The example that was used was the properties at 305 or 350 Monroe Street, I believe is the one. And they said, whoa, how did a 12-foot wide townhome happen? And I say, what's the problem? What's the problem with that? It's a beautiful 12-foot wide townhome. Mr. Rao's property had one right on the edge, I think 19 foot. What's the problem? I support anything around that, but if we're not looking closely what's happening here, we are forcing people to have a 20-foot wide minimum home. And the 17-foot home guy says, I like my home, and there's a lot more of us in the community, and I don't think we have a problem. Am I making sense? I don't want to be confusing. I feel like sometimes I'm confused.
You'd like your home, but I don't have a problem with 17-foot houses. I don't have a problem with any of them. But I didn't make the rules. I'll support what the community brings to this board unless I can see a real detrimental issue with it. And I don't really see a detrimental issue with what we're talking about. You got all sizes of houses in this community. But if somebody wants to bring a small house in here, I'll support a small house. I don't care if it's 2 foot square. If they want a small house, let them build a small house.
They're going to have to go through a plan development process.
That's exactly what everything does that comes into the city. Nothing comes into here and gets built without going through that development.
Am I
right
missing
there,
something?
Him and 3 other people sit together.
Something's not right here. There's some serious confusion, I think, on this
Oh, not
council,
my
and I'd
point,
like for
Ray.
someone to clean it up.
Not on my point. I go to some of the development meetings. You ought to go into them. You learn a lot from it.
I was at the
Yeah,
last one.
Well,
It
I
was
go to
2.5
some of, but
Yeah,
they
we're there
hold them,
together.
and that's where it all gets worked out.
It's crystal clear, 20-foot wide minimum homes for the first time in the history of Cape Canaveral is happening on this tonight. And if this council doesn't see the problems with that's going to increase. Dave, I know you argue that total square footage doesn't go up, but when we say that a townhome goes wider, I looked up case study after case study, and you do listen to the people, and the people elected us to represent them, so we have to listen to ourselves. I love our boards. I think they're going to do a great job, and I value them because they get laser focused on specific issues. But at the end of the day, when we talk about this, we've got to really weigh in. It's down to us, and it's our decision. We've got all the facts in front of us. We've got 20-foot wide minimum homes here. This is the first time this has ever been passed in the history of our city's existence on townhomes. And you cannot do what you said the way that you used to for any new homes after April, whatever it is, 2018. From any new development moving on, the 12-foot homes are done in this city. So if you want to allow people to move in here and to build a 12-foot home, by voting yes for this, you are eliminating that option. You're eliminating a 13-foot, a 14-foot, a 15, all the way up to 19 feet, 11 inches is not accepted in this city because it is undesirable and all the other words that I just don't agree with. And that's the issue at hand. That's where we got to go to bed every single night and say, God, why did we do that? Was that necessary? What are we gaining? And that's why I wanted to separate it. Massively different issues. I don't want to slow Mr. Rao down, but this issue here, I talk to the people, I talk to my wife, I look around, I'm like, that's 17 foot, that's 15 foot, that's 20 foot. And we got some nice protections for non-conforming homes in there. Thank you for putting that in there. But new development, I think we're moving in the absolute wrong direction, and it'll be a regretful mistake as the rest of the market is trending down to smaller homes. And I'm happy to discuss that if there's any confusion on that. But just being crystal clear, you cannot build anything new under 20 foot wide in this city.
Agree with you.
That's not accurate.
No.
I just indicated earlier, you can go through the PD process and you can build a 4-foot wide house.
Then why are we talking about this?
Because the straight R2, this is townhouse zoning district, that's what we're talking about, just the townhouse district, Wes. We're not talking about the market. If the market says we want 10-foot townhouses, we have a process that would allow that.
I'm confused on why this.
What are you confused? All I'm saying is if a developer comes in here and says, they're the ones that are spending all the money, they are the market. If the market says, I want to build a townhouse project, 10-foot wide townhouses, I would say, great. We're going to go through a PD process, a plan development process, and we're going to make that happen.
Okay,
So for you to say you can't do that, that's not correct.
So what happened at Monroe Street? That this was this big problem. That person came in and did something that made us go, oh no, never again. What happened there?
That was one of the, and you know this because I've talked to you about this. So this shouldn't be new information to you. That what happened was one of the P&Z members, a long-time member, he's been on this board for 30 plus years, indicated that he didn't realize that 12-foot homes could be built. And he started this whole ball rolling. And the P&Z board requested that I prepare an ordinance that would not allow that to happen anymore. So that's how the ball started rolling.
So
in the townhouse zoning district.
So what you just said there was that a 12-foot wide townhome was built. A P&Z board member came to you and said, hey, we need to stop this. This stops it.
No, what the P&Z board member said, I don't feel this is appropriate. We'd like you to prepare an ordinance, bring it back to us, and we're going to have a discussion about it.
So this solidifies that 12-foot townhomes are inappropriate.
In the townhouse zoning district, it was not allowed. If you want to do a 12-foot, see, you're putting words in my mouth, Wes. That's not what I'm saying. And I'll say it one more time. If someone wants to build a 12-foot wide townhouse, there's a process to do that. I'm not saying they're inappropriate.
So if I was to go demo down the Monroe Street townhomes, can I do that again?
Yes, if you went through the PD process,
Did he have to go through the PD process?
No, he didn't.
That's the change?
What?
We're adding in a PD process?
No, the PD process exists.
But he didn't have to go through it.
Correct.
Prior.
Wow.
Then I don't know what we're voting on.
When you go outside of the zoning classification, then you have to go to what he's telling
Right. See, Wes, I think you're confusing issues. We have a townhouse district that has these things.
And these are the standards for townhome
And these are the
district.
standards for townhouses. Correct.
New standards.
These are standards that have been in the city since 1962. They've varied over the years. The city council, as you're just doing this evening, the city council has made policy decisions to change things. Townhouses could be built on 16-foot houses. The city council decided 20 feet was appropriate. You're doing the same thing again tonight. You're just determining whether a 20-foot wide townhouse is the minimum for the townhouse district. Wes, I think your issue is should government tell the market what's appropriate? Should we tell homeowners what's appropriate? And what I'm saying is the city has a process that allows 12-foot townhouses.
Does this process exist today?
Oh, it's existed
Then
for
why
years.
do we need this?
Because I'll tell you why.
Yeah,
There's a
that's
lot
what
of.
I'm after.
Okay.
This is
perfect.
very confusing.
Okay. Most of the townhomes in the city are 20-foot wide. Would you agree with that statement?
That's a question I asked when I said, how many are going to be impacted as non-conforming? And the answer I got was all of them. So that was pretty creative.
Most of the townhomes in the city are 20 feet wide. And as we discussed at the last hearing, I think I'm getting a signal of. Well, I think this is a policy decision for the council.
So
Can
I
we
think
move
it's
on?
unwise for the council to vote on anything that's confusing. Unless council's crystal clear on this one, I don't know if it sounds like we've always been able to do something. What's changed? I'm yet to get an answer on that. I think something massively has changed, and I think that it was in the name of what's appropriate, and it was addressing the width of a townhome. And there's got to be somewhere in the city that it's going to be more difficult to build a 12-foot townhome. There has to be something that's making this more difficult. Because if nothing's changing, then what's the deal? What are we doing? And I see for the first time ever 20-foot wide minimum. And we go, well, you can just come talk.
Mr. Morrison, I'm going to ask you finished, because I'm going to ask the council right down on the end. Andrea, do you have anything?
Angela.
I'm sorry, I'm thinking. Angela? I'll call you Miss A.
I would like to move on, and I would
Well,
like to.
I'm asking you right now, do you have anything that you need to say that's different than what we've been going through?
No,
You
I think
understand
that
what
this
you're
is.
getting ready to vote on?
I
I hope
understand
so. Crystal
very
clear.
well. Thank you very
Mr.
much.
Randalls, are you ready to vote and make a motion?
I am, but I feel I probably need to explain some things because I was one of those turkeys that was here in 1981 and made this, and let me explain the reason why. Nobody's asked why.
Standards.
Our code, city code of ordinances, addresses everything from parking to minimum width. You can build a one-bedroom, 650 square foot dwelling unit in townhouse ordinance, so you can do that. And you can have a two-bedroom at 750 square feet. Now, that's getting small. But the real crunch that came along here was in 1981. And Bob, you may have been on the planning and zoning board with Dick Thurman, me too at the time, I don't know, probably. Our streets are, the presidential streets are 24 feet wide. There wasn't adequate parking for the townhomes. In the 80s, some people had one car, maybe two. But in a small townhouse, you can't have a two-car garage unless it's 20 feet wide because you can't park two cars. The off-street parking became a problem because people had more cars, maybe children. They had to park in the streets. We have a street now up here that was probably the thrust of this, and everybody parks in the street. They have a garage but it's full of used furniture or whatever, and there's one parking space behind the garage. So if there's two people living there and the garage is full of mattresses or weightlifting equipment or something, one of them cars has got to be on the street. And it's not wide enough with houses on both sides to put two cars on the street, because you can't put two cars and get a fire truck or an emergency vehicle down it. That was the thrust that happened in 1981. And it's in your, under townhouses, and it talks about off-street parking. So this isn't real new. I'll read a paragraph for you if I may. It's section 110-374 under the townhouse ordinance. It says, for a townhouse, there shall be a minimum of 3 parking spaces for each living unit located on the same property as the main building. You can't get 3 cars on unless you put them side by side. And also, the musical car situation comes in. Whoever's the last one in is probably not going to be the first one out in the morning with 3 cars. So somebody's got to move cars around. I'll read the rest of this. It starts same place, 374. For a townhouse, there shall be a minimum of 3 parking spaces for each living unit located on the same property as the main building. The minimum of 3 parking spaces shall be required of all living units of 3 bedrooms or less. Living units containing in excess of 3 bedrooms shall require an additional parking space for each bedroom in excess of 3. That is, we put it in the code in 1981. It's 639.05. It's a statute. And the reason was for parking. If we couldn't get a lot wide enough to have cars parked side by side, somebody's going to have to park in the street. And that was a safety hazard. Currently, we do not allow parking on the street because that 24-foot wide street really hampers the big fire equipment or the apparatus going down there to get to a neighbor that's needed, especially if somebody, the other neighbor on the other side, decides he or she wants to park on the street. You've got a street that's impassable. So that's why the city has an ordinance that says you cannot park on the street. Is that part of our ordinances? On the street or the right-of-way. So there's a reason for this. It just didn't happen because somebody didn't like big, little, small, or green or yellow.
Rocky, we did correct some of that. Correct you. We did allow some on the right-of-way in areas that.
What?
We did allow some on the right-of-way.
Yes.
To correct what you said, but just to make sure the minutes are correct. We
Yeah.
do allow some places on the right-of-way.
Have to.
Okay, go on.
Because they pull in driving, they don't have a garage
Throw
or
a
a
string
parking
on it because
space.
we're getting late.
But there really was a reason why this came about. It wasn't because I like big or small, little, or something else. And Wes had mentioned something that's in here, and this happened also in 1981. It says, until December 31st, 1993, we set a policy that says 50 and 75-foot wide non-conforming lots can have 16-foot wide townhouse lots. So when 1993 came around, all these lots are non-conforming. Means they can continue, but if they burn down or get destroyed, they cannot be rebuilt. So we're trying to correct that for one of the developers that's in the audience tonight that purchased homes that do not fit the 20-foot width. That's another part of this ordinance. So there's minimum setbacks. There's maximum lot coverage. You can only cover 40% of the lot. There's area in the city that has R1, 1 family to a home, R2 and 3, which is where townhouses are, can have 2 and 3. There's industrial, there's commercial. The city is zoned properly at the time when it was made to what those people thought it would be. So there is some reason behind in our code enforcement book, or in our statute book.
A whole lot of reasons.
That's where it came about. Done.
Are you finished?
I'm done.
Everybody? Okay, I don't have anything to add to it. I understand this thing thoroughly. But go ahead and move for a motion.
Yes. Oh, sorry.
I make a motion that we accept ordinance 03-2018 as written.
I second it.
Okay, there is a motion to accept 03-2018 as written.
Mr. Mayor, let's just be sure we,
Participation.
yeah, open the public hearing,
Um,
yes, sir.
Everybody's up here, we've had our say. I'm going to open this to the public, and if you want to say something, you have 3 minutes to come up and tell us. Come on up, we'll let you talk. We know who you are, we got your card up there.
Getting to know me, yeah.
We'll put the other one on here if you don't mind. Can we add this
Sure.
item on this?
Sure, thank you.
Because this is a public hearing, the public is invited. Those are actually just for the public participation portion, the 3 minutes at the beginning of the meeting only, technically.
Okay.
Well, she's still-
Well, my
she's still
question
on 3
is,
minutes.
having served on the P&Z board in the past, I know that you can apply for a variance. We've had people do that on the corner of Poinsett and Lincoln, as a matter of fact. It was out of spec, and so we allowed the variance for it. So my point is, if, as you're saying, David, that you can allow for, people can come in and build whatever they want. It will take them through the process. Then if that's the case, then there is no rule. And so what's the point of changing this regulation to require 20 feet if you can just go ahead and go through the process and get it approved out of variance, out of parameters? I don't understand the logic of that, and that wasn't explained real well
I think it
tonight.
was. If you didn't, you missed it.
I did, how?
Part of it, yes. It's a platted lot of 20 feet.
Right?
That doesn't mean the property is only 20 feet. That means the house is 20 feet.
Right.
And the house width allows for the width of 2 cars.
Right.
Because you got a car sitting out in the street or halfway across the sidewalk or whatever.
Right.
That was the major issue that we were having with townhomes.
And that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
That's the main reason. That's probably the main reason.
Okay, so my question then is, if somebody came in with wanting something narrower than 20 feet and went through the process, is it possible that they could be turned down?
Oh, very, very, very possible, yes.
Okay.
PDs are case-by-case basis.
Okay.
We look at the merits of each application. We look at where they're being proposed. Is it compatible with the adjacent development? So it's a case-by-case project.
Okay, so I misunderstood what you were saying. I thought what you were saying was, if it's out of the regulation, sure, come see us, and we'll work you through the process and get you there. But you won't, because that might not be the case.
Correct.
Okay. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Okay, we can call the motion. We got the motion?
Let's just be certain we've received all the public
Nobody
comment,
else is going to talk.
and we do need to be sure then to close the public hearing, yes, sir.
It
We
was
don't have
already
anybody?
seconded.
Nobody else wants to speak, all right? So we can close it, come back. We had a motion by Andrea, was it?
No?
Or Mike?
And
right?
I seconded
You
it.
seconded it, okay.
Yes.
We have a motion by Mr. Brown and a second by Andrea.
Angela.
Angela. I'm sorry.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown,
4.
Mayor Hogue,
4.
Councilmember Morrison,
Against.
Councilmember Randalls,
For the motion at the second reading.
Okay, we're moving to,
Excuse me, do I get to vote? It's Angela's vote. 4.
We forgot.
oh,
It's been a long day, and it looks like it's going to be a lot
I
longer.
think it's going to be longer. Still trying to get home.
I'm going to change my seat again.
Can we call you something besides Angela? We'll call you Miss A or something like that. Then we won't mess up,
You can
right?
call me Mrs.
Andrea,
Raymond.
Angela,
Mrs.
Miss Raymond, how's that?
That'll be fine. Thank you.
All right.
I just want it to be correct.
Just kidding. All right, item number 7 is ordinance number 042018, and this is our first reading.
Yes, it is.
Okay, next ordinance is ordinance number 04-2018, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Cape Canaveral, Brevard County, Florida, providing for the location of pharmacies and medical marijuana treatment center dispensing facilities within the city, providing for the repeal of prior inconsistent ordinances and resolutions, incorporation into the code, severability, and an effective date. This is the first advertised public hearing for this particular ordinance. At the last council meeting, we discussed the legal requirements for regulating medical marijuana dispensaries provided by state law. We discussed the preemption provision under state law. We've identified what the choices are with respect to medical marijuana dispensaries. We went over the existing law in the city of Cape Canaveral regarding medical marijuana dispensaries, which currently prohibit such dispensaries. At this point, we're presenting this to the council for, again, for first advertised public hearing. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have regarding this ordinance, and so would Dave. Mayor.
Thank you. Council? Open.
Nope, I have nothing to add. We discussed it once.
I have nothing to add.
Ms. Raymond?
Nothing to add, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Morrison?
Yep. Got a question. The state of Florida, when they passed this law, they asked us to treat them like pharmacies. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. And last week, we heard some very elegant explanations. I was very happy with the council's stance on it, and we really treated marijuana like medicine. And that was the big takeaway, is we got it right that day. We don't always get it right up here, but I felt like we got it right that day, and I'll speak for myself. In this council, I was happy that we said, you know what, our community can have access to what we believed was something safer than other options. You can go right to your CVS, and we know the opioid crisis. There was something that competed with painkillers on the market and allowed for safety, and today, my question is, if we're going to treat them like pharmacies as the medicine piece, we historically allowed pharmacies all over the C1 and C2 district, and I get the traffic argument. I just hope that we treat them as their physical locations, just like we used to treat pharmacies. I'm not going to go further than the fact that when we got ahead and we wrote this ordinance, we shoved them in the back of this M1 industrial district. And then the state comes out and says, nope, you can't do that. And my question was, why didn't we just keep the M1 district open and allow pharmacies to go back there? What was the logic? I didn't lead this ordinance. I certainly was on the front end to requesting it, but that would have been an initial question that I asked. I don't know who. Was that idea ever considered?
Let me understand, Wes. Your question is, why does this ordinance not allow pharmacies in the M1 district?
Yeah, medical marijuana treatment facilities or pharmacies in the M1 district, because that's where we had the pharmacies.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at what's allowed, I mean, zoning's all about compatibility. What belongs next to each other? And do you want a retail operation next to a aggregate storage yard? So you have to kind of think that through. What's appropriate? Where do different uses belong? And the consensus of the P&Z board and the council was that, at least at first reading, was that they're appropriate and they should be in the commercial districts of the city.
Yeah, agreed. Commercial, and if we treat them like pharmacies, my question was, well, medical marijuana treatment facility is a retail space. It would be a retail space, and why was that suddenly compatible next to the way we had the old ordinances written prior to the state law putting that on us?
Well, the reason the old ordinance was written such is that to keep the city out of legal problems. If you look at other uses in the M1 district, you have adult places. You have other uses that, the city from a legal standpoint really can't say, you can't do this here.
Okay.
So we have to allow for these uses in certain locations. And that is a tactic, or that is an approach that is often used, is to put these uses in locations where, from a practical.
David, if you don't mind,
Yeah, go ahead.
One comment that needs to be, comparing what the city did 6 or 7 years ago to what you're considering tonight is apples and oranges. 6 or 7 years ago, the city council adopted an ordinance regulating medical marijuana centers. Okay, there was no significant state legislation that defined dispensaries or addressed. What the city was trying to do was get out in front of a referendum that had a lot of open questions. And the council made a policy decision to put something on the books before the citizens considered the first referendum on medical marijuana that failed. So that was a legislative scheme that was done in that context at that particular time. So I don't remember exactly where the city decided to put them, but I think you need to make note of the fact that the context was different and it included growing, and including processing. All we're talking about is the dispensing retail aspect of the medical marijuana issue as it's now evolved after the second medical marijuana amendment was considered by the voters and passed. So a little bit, I'm not sure, Dave, maybe you got another comment about that, but I just want to make sure that that context was out there for the rest of the council members that weren't here at the time, six or 7 years ago.
The city's policy regarding this issue certainly has evolved, and it's been a dynamic environment regarding this issue.
Yep, I appreciate that. I can certainly understand how, if you're going to be growing plants, why that would go out there. That fits. But the policy last year, where we made a decision to ban.
Oh, that's the other policy, yeah.
That's the policy I'm talking about. So it's not about retail. It's about use, because adult stores are retail. And to say that a marijuana treatment facility, we kind of wanted to, let's be honest, had the state not came out and put that restriction on us, we would have probably shoved them, we'd have kept the existing ordinance and put them back there. And to me, that creates the stigma. And if we're going to treat them like pharmacies, well, then we should have just kept that open. And the obvious reason is, well, a pharmacy probably wouldn't go out there anyway. So here we're left with two big issues. Keep them away from the residents, which is the argument I've heard, and then consider traffic. And so the motion that I stand by, that the mayor brought up some valid points on, we've already ran an ad on this, which today I think we have, is there is no difference in those properties to the south. If this council, once we get through this, will bring this back, I went above and beyond and went out again. The folks that came out and fought the gas stations are not against medical marijuana treatment facilities, the ones I spoke to. The property owners on there would welcome medical marijuana treatment facilities, and they would certainly welcome pharmacies, which they're no longer allowed to have by this rule. So I just encourage this council to really consider that the next time we get this policy out, that we start with the right foot forward and we say, there's no difference in traffic anywhere on A1A. So that argument's out the window. And to say that they shouldn't be near one resident opposed to the other, I think is a little different. So I stand my ground. I wanted to let you know, over the past 30 days, my mind could have changed on it, and I wanted to share with you it hasn't, and those are some new points that I had brought up, and I hope this council considers, if we get the opportunity, I'll certainly make the motion tonight to give them a chance, because I think it's less expensive, correct me if I'm wrong, to get this amendment changed tonight, opposed to run the ad a first time, run it a second time, and then to bring it all the way back through the process again. To add in those parcels south of the economic overlay district. I think that we're picking winners and losers on A1A, and I don't think that's the right choice to make. So that's my comments. Thank you.
Mike, you. Ms. Raymond?
I have nothing to add, thank you.
Rocky? You have anything in?
No, I don't.
I don't have anything to add to it other than the fact that if we have such a big influx of these things coming in, we can expand it to the whole city. But I think starting off on a small scale, I heard all the arguments and reasons why we put it in M1. I know why massage parlors are up there, and all the history of all that M1 stuff. And the first time around, we had our choice whether we wanted them or not, and the state didn't have any policy on them, so we just chose to sit tight and let's see what happens. That's why we had a no vote to have them. It wasn't that we didn't want them. It was let's just sit tight and see what regulations are going to be brought out to us. And then we can make our decisions and have them where we want them. And I think where they're at on A1A and the overlay district suits me just fine. I don't have any reason to string them all over the place. I don't think they're appropriate, basically, because everybody has the mental attitude that marijuana is marijuana. This is medical. And for right now, let's see how the cannon roars, let's say. Putting them next up along Atlantic Avenue is basically all residential onto the North Atlantic area. So I don't think that would be appropriate to stick something up right in a residential area. Let's put them right in where we got them, and later on, if we have a need for 3,000 of these things or whatever, well, we got to do whatever we got to do. But right now, I'm happy with what we got. I don't see any reason to really get into all this changing everything.
Yeah,
This has all been well thought out by the boards, and I don't have a problem with it.
I think that we already talked about that it would take about a population of 70,000 people to support one medical marijuana
Yeah, I don't even think we're going to get one.
pharmacy. So nobody has even come forth necessarily.
Yep.
So I think
Well,
that we're just
That's my
fine the way
point.
it
I don't
is.
think we're going to be overwhelmed with these things, so we don't need to create a monster out of something that doesn't need to be there. If there's a lot of them coming in, then fine, we'll have to deal with it. We dealt with gas stations, we dealt with hotels, we're dealing with car rentals, we deal with all that stuff, but I think we got something that's just apropos for the size of this town. There's no other discussion here, I'm going to take it to the public. Anybody want to talk on this issue? Yes, sir. Your name, please, and
Hi, I'm Tim Bass. I just had a question for you. Let me first say, I think that medical marijuana certainly has a good place in the community, but I just thought it should go into the record. Have you considered that marijuana, either medical or recreational, is still against federal law? And so I just kind of thought it might be something worth discussing on the record, that by voting for this, recognizing it's in compliance with state law, that you're actually voting against federal law. I just would like that being discussed. Again, I think it's a great idea. Hopefully, the federal law will
let's
change.
get Bailey Wig for me. Let me answer that.
Okay. No, we discussed that at the last council
Okay,
meeting,
sorry.
that indeed marijuana is still regulated Class 1. It's still prohibited under federal law, the federal government, Congress, and its omnibus budget bill has prohibited the Department of Justice from expending funds to prosecute individuals in possession of marijuana for medical marijuana, provided those persons are in possession in that state in accordance with state marijuana laws. So that's how the federal government has chosen to address the issue right now. That could change, don't know. But, it is technically still a federal law violation to possess marijuana. But as I explained, that's what the Department of Justice is dealing with congressional budget appropriation laws.
Okay, anybody else in the audience would like to say something? Hearing nothing, we come back to the council. Close public discussion. Okay, we just go for a motion.
I'd like to move to adopt ordinance number 04-2018.
Second? Do we have a second?
I second.
Okay, a motion by Mrs. Raymond and a motion seconded by Mr. Brown. Would you call the roll, please?
Mayor Pro Tem Brown?
4.
Mayor Hoag?
4.
Councilmember Morrison?
4.
Councilmember Randalls?
For ordinance 04-2018 at the first reading.
Councilmember Raymond?
4.
All righty. Item number 8 is review for the approve the strategic planning retreat items. And you have them all listed on your cover sheet, and we need to discuss this as we discussed it in the retreat. We all know what it is and where we're going with it.
I think I understand. It's probably the longest city manager recommendation you do a year. It's quite a loaded one in there. And we're basically voting that this retreat happened, that this reflects what happened, that we, but when it gets into the money, I mean, that really comes out during budget time. What we're saying here is we got a unified goal on these projects. Is that correct?
That's pretty much correct, yes. And what typically happens is we're already pulling together the fiscal year budget for, let me stop and think now, but anyway, the 18-19 fiscal year. And additionally, the CIP for the next 5 years. And those are documents that go through workshops and budget hearings and council votes on numerous times, basically. And it's not locked in stone. It can be changed as simply as 3 members of the city council decide that they want to drop a project or move one up as a higher priority or something like that. So you're correct. Okay. In simple terms, yes, Wes, that's really what it is. The dollars will fluctuate, and in some of these cases, the financial impact on the city could theoretically be larger based upon how things would evolve. But our goal in general is to reduce those expenditure amounts of city dollars. And, we see that change we're working with the county on a number of issues, the TDC and those things. So I think, yes, we would recommend, and we do recommend, adopt with a recognition that this will be changing from time to time, and there will be higher priorities, or these will be lower priorities over time.
Thank you.
Is there anything in here that anybody needs to question or change, take it out, or are we happy with all the items? We've been working on this for quite a long time. And as y'all were there, we all were there, so. Some of it might not be reality in the near future. Some of it might be a little bit later. It depends on the issues that we come up with on certain things. I know there's several of them in here that can be done without any problem, but one or two maybe. Yeah. We got a little bit of the garden to hoe yet, you might say, to get there. So, but they're all things that are in this 5-year plan. So.
Yeah. So simply stated, there's plenty of bites at the apple.
Yeah, I have a comment on it. It says that under goals identification, the council expressed a high level of satisfaction with the progress made on 2017. They also unanimously agreed with the proposed ongoing goals as presented in Appendix C. I think if I remember myself, sometimes I feel this way and I don't say it, but I think I'm pretty clear. I remember saying that, this is $10 million worth of projects. I being my first strategic plan, I said, I don't, for the most part, I agree, but to say to the point you made, every single project and to hold us to it now that I understand, it wasn't unanimous. I felt like I held out, and I felt like all of us brought up some really good points.
We just have to draw the line somewhere, and I understand you're basically suggesting parsing all this out, yeah. and where the normal process that we followed in places that I've been city manager has been, these are general, they move from general to specific through the funding allocation process, grant availabilities, and opportunities. And remember too, this includes the component for a citizen survey, and that might change everything where we have the community say that our priority is this. Well, certainly we will react and act accordingly to try to meet that request. And so I think I'm sensing, and I'm not trying to be sarcastic, we can talk this stuff to death and never get anything done, or we can generally agree that this is our focus at this moment in time, subject to opportunities, timing, changes. Because, I mean, you know, the CIP is 5 years. Well, some of those that are in the longer term of the CIP may never actually really happen. And some of these that are on this list, I firmly suspect when we present this 5-year CIP to you, some of the lesser priorities when you get down to, you know, item 6, 7, 8 or something like that, those will be much later on in the CIP, subject again to grant fundings, opportunities, whether or not there's still the desire to do that. And so it's totally within the control of the city council, and, you know, it's 8:15 now, and we still have a big agenda item to talk
This
about.
stuff folk could come in tomorrow morning and say, hey, I just got $100,000 for Wagner Park. Boom, it's done. We don't have to figure out how we're going to pay for it. That's the whole general idea behind all this.
Yeah,
It's stuff that,
and,
it's a wish list.
and we have several $1 million that we've requested from the TDC, and we have an upcoming negotiating session with the county near the latter part of this month that may determine where we end up with the county on Sheridan Park and some of the city's express positions in the negotiations. And again, nothing is locked in concrete except change.
That's been in the mill a long time, Sherry.
Thank you for answering that. You know, $10 million in projects, you want to make sure that we understand, so I can explain that back. Here's what I loved about the meeting. First of all, I think Dr. Tom did a fantastic job. I enjoyed the camaraderie between the council to share about it. We had a lot of fun in there. And I thought there was some really good ideas that were presented. Staff was involved. And I felt like alignment and clarity was happening. And now we're talking about let's focus in on it. And really, it allowed for a SWOT analysis, which I thought was a pretty cool perspective that I think the staff worked hard on. And you could see from their perspective the SWOT. And then you also saw we have a great staff. We have a lot of experience in the room, and they've brought forth, here's some cool projects. They're factoring in community engagement, which is, you know, connecting with the public. They're factoring in things that we have to say. And my request, and I'd really like to get council involved in this, is to say at the next brainstorming meeting, the last one we did, it was an unprompted meeting. Josh just said, no agenda, let's talk it out. Many of you here tonight were there. I think over 20 people showed up, one of the largest, probably the largest non-topic brainstorm meeting besides the community garden, which was very topical. This was just people were firing in ideas, and some of them were very consistent with the proposals of the city. And through that, some people couldn't make it, but I had more ideas. I think all of us experienced that positive flow of information. Angela's out riding her bike. She's talking to people. Rocky's out helping people in the yard. He's talking to people. Mayor's at Pro Tem's at a PTO event with the kids at the school. He's talking to people. And I think the mayor's phone probably rings more than anyone's. If anything goes down, you know, what do? You call your mayor, right? So, and I'm out there, you know, talking to people in my capacity on social media and working, and we all have a different perspective. And what I thought about was, wow, is there an opportunity for us on this next brainstorm meeting to get involved? 3 of us were at that one. If the whole council could try to get there and maybe make it a 2-hour meeting, and to take this same format and to run a 2-hour meeting. This is completely voluntary, where we come in and we just interact with the public, because one of the big concerns in that meeting was we want to be in the loop. We want to get involved earlier in the process. And I hear staff over and over again like, gosh, you know, we hold workshops, we do this thing, and I empathize with that. And I think that if we can get in a brainstorming meeting, to me, it would give council an opportunity to present some ideas as well, in addition to, and the reason why that's important is I heard a really good idea out of Council Member Raymond, who talked about when people, because one of the threats that we talked about during the SWAT was, hey, code violations, that's one of them. That is a big issue in this city. What about this and this? And you talk to our code enforcement, they're like, we're working hard, we're all over the place. And we have to say, but what do we need to do? How do we get it better? And she talked about, hey, when somebody's in code violation, it's still a warning, let's walk it in. Let's just show them where the code was. And I started thinking about, your ideas, Mayor, about, hey, that Inspiration Park, maybe that's a good private sector. And it made me realize, as Rocky, I think you were talking at the time with some folks down off by Josh's house in Longboat, and me and Mayor Pro Tem and Angela as well, we're talking about the A1A and crossing. And I said, had we had a couple more hours, some more new ideas from this council would have came out. You match those up with what this was a very heavy staff and very professionally done, very nice done. And if you could marry those, we would have the ability just to consider. I'm not trying to be the change agent here. I'm just saying, open your imagination, add that in, and we can now come to the table, pair that up with the community survey as that new information comes in. And I think we'll find out that some big issues have come. One of them that was not mentioned was the lagoon. It's a hot issue within this community. And some ideas on pumping oxygen back into the water came up to me. Get some large pumps, solar-powered pumps, pumping that in. Also use those pumps that when the rain comes. Look, I'm not here to vet that. Please do not waste my time on that. Another idea was to have an interactive map with this city, to where when I asked Jeff Ratliff the other day, hey, can you show me that sewer line back on Holman? He sends me a map, says we're working on another one. I'm looking at it, squinting my eyes. See a lot of cities. Josh has already started the groundwork for a lot of this stuff. He can show you where traffic accidents have happened, and to infuse an interactive map that shows all departments what's going on. One centralized place. You can see where economic development projects. You saw a fantastic presentation by Todd Morley the other day with Space Coast Daily. And so many people said, wow, look at all the things that this city is doing. So you can go to this map and see this project's coming here. Look at this location. How many rumors do we hear spread? You hear what's going on at that property or this? This would clean it up. It would take the public records request down. And I think it would involve every department from finance, city clerk, all the way down the line, culture and leisure services. Here's all of our dog-friendly parks. This might be something we're working on, but if we can say we're going to invest money to build a park, building an app takes the same sort of resources and a centralized place where people can go online, you can print these maps, and you can see by turning on different layers, you can see parcels, you can see easements, you can see sewer lines, you can see new projects, all of these things, just as an example idea, and there's tons more like it out there that you have, that people have, and that Josh has got probably a long list as well, and we've seen a lot of them here, to where we can come together. And that would be my request is, yeah, let's go forward with this, but if we could sneak this in, I think that it would be a lot of fun to add that layer of information and get a little bit more data to the table. And as we have the flexibility to spend the funds to address the lagoon and to do what I think is a very cool efficiency game with an interactive map. So we can, with a click of a button, really have live tracking on what's happening within our city. So just some thoughts and ideas and feedback on a very, very good meeting.
Well, yes, sir.
think
The only
it's
thing
time for a motion,
I'd like to
yeah.
say about the brainstorming is if we go there, we have to be very careful on what's being discussed, because a lot of that stuff will come to us. So.
Yeah, public workshop, follow the format of the
just don't wanna-
Sunshine Law.
We
do
get
a
involved.
24-hour notice.
Well, when it comes to that point, two of us have got to get up and leave.
No, I think we can throw a sunshine, within 24 hours notice, if we publicly address it and minutes are taken, we could abide by the Sunshine Law and have we can roll up our, because we do not.
I would
just as you know,
partake,
the opportunity to
I would
work-
be one to get up and leave. I'm sorry, I will not. I've been down the road of sunshine, ethics and whatever. I'm sorry, I'm going to get up and leave. And
To have a conversation.
Yes, sir, yes, sir. If it comes to a brainstorming and it gets into something that's, we're going to be voting on it. I'm going to say, I'll see y'all later.
If minutes are
So
taken
just
and.
be very careful on.
Okay, I'm trying to roll up my sleeves and go to
I'm
work
just
with
saying,
you.
yeah, right. I'm going to roll up my sleeves too, but we'll do it here. We'll do it at P&Z. We'll do it in the director's office. We'll do it where. I won't do it in
all
a
right,
brainstorming
all right.
meeting because
Okay.
you're going to be sitting up in Tallahassee in a court.
Okay.
So, I know where you're going, Wes.
Yeah,
I know
I-
where you're going, but you got to be very careful.
We hear you. We hear you.
You got to be very careful.
Thank you. We have a
So
city attorney.
I
who
would
could set
like
us
to
straight, but yeah, it's-
go forward with this. If we're through talking of this, we're going to open it to public discussion.
I don't
I
think so.
don't, nope, we don't need to.
It's an action item.
Anybody want to say anything? Okay, Mr. Avery, come on up. Let's do it.
Try to be very, very quick. First off, I did attend the brainstorming meeting. Very, very good. A little bit long. I would have liked to have seen a little more time with it, but it was very good. Josh did a good job. Mayor was there. Angela was there. Wes was there. My first thing would be on your review approved city of the strategic planning retreat. I did read that, and the survey to the public. How do I get a hold of that? How can I become part of the survey?
That is something that we're going to be bringing out. Josh is getting that prepared.
We're working on the details of the approach now.
Okay.
And I promise you, you'll be given an opportunity.
Oh, you sure?
It's
I've heard this before.
Yeah.
Small state at the moment. We're
And-
working there.
Again, just because all I could do was read what I found online. You had a meeting after this public strategic planning, and it said that the meeting started, called to order at 2:49, adjourned at 2:57.
No.
That's 8 minutes.
That's totally inaccurate. The meeting started at 10:30.
I didn't write it. I just read it.
When the gavel went down is what he's talking
No,
about.
we're talking apples and oranges. The workshop started at 10:30 in the morning.
I understand that.
But what the mayor did is what you're referring to, Joe, is he opened it for public comment as part of the retreat.
Okay, I understand that.
Yeah, so it didn't
But
last just
after
a
that,
minute.
it said discussion to continue at the council meeting.
And that's what this is, isn't it?
Yes, it is. But it seemed to me like someone was wanting to leave. Thank you. Oh, and one more thing, she was very, very right on the dog park issue.
Okay. Okay. All right, we have a discussion item here. We've got to close it out.
No, did you vote to?
No, I'm saying we got to close it out. We're
Oh,
getting ready to
yes.
do a motion on it and close it out. We're going to look for a motion on our strategic planning here to accept it as presented to us. We need a motion to move it forward.
Yeah.
I make a motion that we approve the city council strategic planning retreat results report
And I second it.
As presented.
as presented.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Brown and a second by Ms. Raymond.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown,
4.
Mayor Hoag,
Or,
Councilmember Morrison,
4.
Councilmember Randalls. For the motion. Councilmember Raymond.
4.
okay, down to item number 9 is a policy discussion related to code of ordinances for animals in the park and on the beaches. City manager, city attorney, and council explains. Who wants to go first?
I'm happy to. I brought this one forth, and thank you for getting this on the agenda. Many citizens have reached out, and a fun fact that it's been, me and I figured out, almost 50 years since this council has publicly come together at a city council meeting and had a discussion on this. And it is a controversial discussion. And it's one that the comments came up within these groups, and the people really wanted it. And the question was asked, why doesn't our council talk about it? And after I watched it and observed the traction of it, I simply reviewed everything, and I said, you know what? Let's do it. And we don't have to spend a lot of time on it, but we can at least share some initial thoughts and discuss as a council whether or not we want to do anything. We don't have to move fast. We don't have to move slow. It's completely open. And I think this is how good policy starts. It starts with a discussion. It starts from the people, a proposal from one of the people that they elected, and it comes in, and all the people that were elected get to share their thoughts, and you as a public get to hear. And what I did to try to organize it was just frame a few simple 5 questions, and I tried to put them in a very logical order that would kind of shape the outcome. We've already heard some concerns tonight, some valid ones, and if at any point I misstep and said I am for dogs on the beach earlier, like the record show, I meant to say dogs on park. Dogs on the beach is a very different animal, no pun intended there, and it's one that I've heard both sides of the argument. And so today I just wanted to just run through these questions, and I did propose a next step process, and I'm not anchored to it. I just said, hey, I want to be a good agenda setter and say, hey, here's what I'm leading with. I'll put myself out there and I'll say, if I was king, this is what I do, but that's not how this works. We'd all have to agree. So the first question I just wanted to ask council was, as of today, does this council have enough information on this subject to be willing to state a position on it? You don't have to answer that, but if you said, you know what, Wes, I've thought this one upside down, left and right, and I'll tell you right now what my position is. I'll be friendly and say, I personally do not as of today. I need to learn much more on this topic. So if any other council, that was kind of the beginning of the discussion.
You know, I'm an animal lover, but hate to say it, I'm against animals on the beach or dogs on the beach. I think that people, when they come to the beach, shouldn't have to. We have a lot of Cape Canaveral residents that will abide by what ordinances, but you have a lot of people from out of town that do not want to pick up behind their dogs, and I do not like to go and take my grandkids and anybody else to our beaches and have to walk through whatever. But I am against pets on the beach, except for service dogs.
Okay. I'm ready. I like dogs. I have owned a dog, and we've had a dog in our family for 40 out of 48 years of marriage. The way I look at it, the problem is not with dogs. The problem is with some dog owners who do not follow the rules. Cape Canaveral has signs up at the entrance of all of our beaches that clearly state no dogs on the beach, $500 fine. People do not always abide by this. They allow all kinds of dogs, just not just service dogs. We also have signs reminding people to pick up. They don't always pick up after their dogs. I ride around town, most of you know that, and especially on the empty lots on the corners. And during the summer months, when it's hot enough, it smells. And there is no way to pick up urine of dogs. But the empty lots smell. And anybody can see that this smells, and it's not very nice. And how do we pick up urine on the beach? And urine also contains a lot of bacteria. Another thing that I'd like to say about this. Dogs, especially when it's very hot, dogs' paws can get burnt on the hot sand. When I walk on the hot sand, I burn my feet. And I know that dogs do not like that. And my dogs never liked it, I'm sure. But I never brought my dog on the beach. Now, there are special areas for dogs, and I have been to some of these dog beaches over in Venice, and they have an area where the dogs can go. It's a limited area and limited times. I think I'm in favor of a limited area, perhaps, but not necessarily on the beach. I want to believe that most dog owners consistently pick up after their pets, but some are disrespectful. You cannot say anything to them because they feel that they can do whatever they want, and some of them do lack consideration for other people. I have received many emails about this, and I heard that over near Washington Avenue, Bendix Park, I believe, it's on the south side of Palms East, and that really is bad. People tell me that they cannot walk there because dogs defecate there, and it's just a mess. It's not picked up. If the majority of the residents want dogs on the beach, as I said, I propose a special area designated as the Cape Canaveral Dog Beach and limit the times. However, I would prefer that the dog owners, if they want to bring their dogs on the beach, go down to Cocoa Beach between 4th and 16th Street, and that would really take care of the R issue, and we really wouldn't have to vote on it. I also believe, I also believe that I have gone to the Turtle Conservation Society, and they have given me these brochures. I will put them out after the meeting. Dogs on the Beach, be a wildlife-friendly pet owner. And as you go through this, it's very educational, and they do list all the places in Florida that have the beaches open to dogs on a limited basis. But the impact of dogs on the beach and the impact to wildlife. And I learned something I didn't know. If birds and our shorebirds see dogs on the beach, they react in a very negative way, and perhaps they won't even come back to nest or to use that beach again. I did not realize that dogs were that perceptive that they could tell, not dogs, excuse me, birds were that perceptive that they could tell the difference between people and dogs. I thought that was just amazing. And we, as we know, and you'll see in this brochure, dogs dig, and we do have our turtles, and our turtle conservation people are very, very upset about this because of some of the dogs that might dig up the poor babies and the eggs, okay? And they aren't here tonight. They wanted to come, but they are doing training sessions this week. So I'm sorry they couldn't make it. I will put these out, and you can get them in the back. Thank you. I think I've said enough.
Ms. Reynolds.
Certainly. Some of us have a preconceived idea, and I try to reject all that because I'm certainly open to the discussion. But my gut feeling is that I would be opposed to the animals on the beach. I believe there's, if indeed we had a local park that people would go to, when you talk to people, the ones that I casually talk to, I said, well, how far would you go to that park? Oh, I'm not gonna walk to it, and I don't have a car. And, well, it's pretty obvious that one park in one area of Cape Canaveral isn't going to suffice for everybody. Ocean Woods has, right behind me, homeowners group, and they're adamantly out there cleaning up after the animals constantly, and that's their own residence. So I would support us finding a location, and that's the big problem, is finding a location. Nobody wants an animal park near them that would be fenced in, that people could let their animals run loose. I'd have to have some real strong education as to the advantages of letting them run on the beach, because right now I don't believe that's the place for dogs. Mayor. Oh, I can't shoot. It's your project.
No, I've spoken. It's our project.
You had all you, Mike?
I'm done.
I kind of am mixed on this, really. If some of us up here remember the peacock fight, you know, everybody wanted peacocks, everybody didn't want peacocks. And I think we got everybody wants dogs on the beach and everybody wants dogs on the beach. We dealt with the peacocks and we had a committee that was going to take care of it and who's going to enforce it and boom, boom, boom and all that business. Peacocks are still overrunning the city and there's no committee. And I think it's going to be an enforcement issue down there. It's an enforcement issue right now. These sheriff's office is down there all the time telling people you can't have your dog down here. And it's for a reason. It's not that you don't want the dog down there. To me, it brings it all to the health issue of the dogs. Not the people on the beach with their dogs. And the other issue is that people won't keep them on a leash. They'll let them run. And now you got the problem that Mrs. Raymond talked about is the birds. And believe me, birds do remember. They'll leave, they won't come back. And the other issue I got is just the turtle nesting. People, I see people with their dogs in the park. They don't pay attention to what that dog's doing. They're talking, the dog's 20 feet away over there. People, you know, it's just it's a thing that we're not going to be able to enforce it. And then the other issue is if we put an area on the beach, where is that going to be? Who wants that in their front yard in the condos? We're going to hear about that. I'm sure up in Harbor Heights they're going to want it. They're going to want those people all coming up there through Harbor Heights with their dog and letting them do their business in their yard. And so it's an issue that I think if this council really wants it and these people in this city want it, I think it needs to go on a ballot. And if you get a majority, 50, 60%, then have at it. And then we can spend the money that you so allocate to enforce it. But for this council to sit here and make a decision on it, I'm not going to make the decision. Because I've been through the peacock fight, I've been through the feral cat fight, and we still have feral cats and we still have peacocks overrunning the city because we can't enforce it. And that's what's going to happen on the beach. So I'm all behind not supporting this right now. Let's see how Cocoa Beach works out. I got their ordinance here. It's a pretty hefty ordinance and it's pretty hefty fines and it is, here it is. I've looked through it and I think that if it works out down there for them, then we can take a look at it, but I don't see it working down there. It's going to be an enforcement issue. They're already talking about how many park rangers they got to hire, how many more code enforcement people, and if y'all want to pay for that, then we'll put it on a ballot and you support it. But I won't support it for the three issues, mainly is health, the turtle nesting, and the birds. People let their dogs run loose down there. I've been down there. I see dogs on the beach. And you tell somebody, I just got to where I don't tell people anymore because I don't want to listen to what I've been told. So, it's none of my business, but it is my business. I live here, you don't live here, or you do live here and you live somewhere else and you bring your dog here to do whatever you're going to do. But, so therefore, I don't support it until people put it on the ballot. If that's where you want to go with it, I'll vote to put it on a ballot, but otherwise I won't support it.
Okay. Thank you.
It's for not just my opinion. I think it's health reasons, disrupts his nature, and that sea turtles are.
I have one more comment to make about this. From a business angle and an economics angle, people come here to Cape Canaveral for the pristine beach, and especially in Cape Canaveral. I went to the beach last week, I think it was Thursday, it was a beautiful sunny day, and there were about 10 women sitting in a circle. And guess where they were from? Cocoa Beach. I think already the people from Cocoa Beach are coming to Cape Canaveral because of our pristine beach, and they don't want to deal with the dogs. So, and I have heard a lot of emails, and I have talked to a lot of people, and I have asked them over and over again, and they aren't in favor. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Council, for sharing with us. And some of you came right out. No confusion on many of your opinions and where you stand. I wanted to be polite and kind of guide through. And you have an efficient council. I can tell you that I'm hearing, and I took some notes, and the record will show that dogs are great. Some of the owners aren't, right? I mean, that's a big one.
Yeah,
That's an issue.
it's
I mean,
true.
unfortunately, there's bad parents out there too. I mean, people treat their kids less than favorable. You know, some people treat their dogs less than favorable. So that happens. The cigarette butts fly, the abusers are there, and we got to work through it. I heard enforcement issues. I heard, health issues, wildlife issues. I said that I was open. I want to learn more. I've got a record here of all 63 beaches in the state of Florida that was sent to me with all of their comparative policies and how it's working with them. I've also got a lot of the paperwork thanks to a resident who was able to help me on the heavy lifting on what happened with what's happening with Cocoa Beach and really what's working, kind of best practices. I know this staff has probably done some research on this issue. I'm open to it. This is what policy is all about, is to say, we hear the reservations, we hear the concerns. I've heard, hey, maybe, if you had to vote right now, it looks like the scales are probably leaning towards no. Sounds like this side, the three would say, we're open to it. There's some limited issues or limitations on where it would go if you had a certain park, time of day, and all of the things. And I think that if we can overcome and think about ways to address those issues, there's many different paths to policy getting passed, whether it becomes a ballot or initiative or referendum, however it comes to rise. Today, I think that I learned that this council is, no one's jumping for joy for dogs, and I hope that the people can see that, and it's because there's some valid concerns there. Maybe in the future, my recommendation was that I would like to take what I've learned. I don't know if I need council's approval here, and to learn more, and if staff wants to speak tonight about some things that they found, and walk softly on this one, and to gather and to think about everything we heard tonight, and to see if there's a way that we couldn't address those issues. And if not, that means this probably isn't right for the community. And referendum and going out to ballot is democracy at its finest. So we'll see where this heads. But today, I think we did a service to the public, and we took something. They were heard. It was important that they were heard. We discussed it, and some of the positions came out early. And I think that no need to go through this process, which says that, unless somebody wants to come out, I would like to have the ability to work with whatever appropriate staff that David felt was necessary. And the key word here is at the right time, because I know the plate is very full. But when staff feels like the time is right, I'll continue to get information on it on my free time and continue to learn more, and I'll continue to build my folder. And when staff is ready, we've heard the concerns. I'm ready to take this one up and to exhaust it as far as it can. If I was to vote for it today, I really would have a low confidence level in whether I was making the right decision. So I want some more information, and thank council very much for taking your time to share that today for the public.
I have one more comment that was in this brochure, Dogs on the Beach, and you can all read it. In many of the cities or the places, you have to have a permit to bring your dog on the beach. I thought that was interesting. Yes. Mm-hmm. And the other thing, and there's a fee for that permit. And then, of course, it was with a leash, and we didn't make that comment. Mm-hmm. And then there is a dog park over there in Venice that they have. It's not exactly on the beach, and at that park, the dogs can just run, but it's with control, voice control. That's very important, voice control, because some of the ordinances in the cities, like when I lived in Manchester, Missouri, I could have a leash or voice control for my dog. And I had a poodle named Cinnamon that could walk on the main street, 4 lanes, but with the voice control that we never put Cinnamon on a leash. It wasn't necessary.
And I guess the takeaway, thank you for sharing that, was if, again, when David's ready, if we could have consensus, I think is what we're looking for tonight, to say that I'm ready when staff is to allocate some resources to compiling some more information together and possibly getting a plan together and
Let's do something here, not to interrupt you, but you're talking about spending staff time and staff time's money.
Yeah.
Money's the object that we don't have just to throw away, but we're going to have a community survey.
Okay.
Maybe that could be put in the community survey. How many people in this city would want dogs on the beach? And then the next part of that survey is which area would we like to have them? And then the biggest part of getting through that hurdle is the people that live right there.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have anywhere in the city that I could see to put dogs on the beach in an area that's confined that we're not going to get complaints.
And then the other issue, of course, is the wet sand versus the dry sand areas.
Okay.
Yeah.
Rather than spending staff time, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't want to,
Yeah.
you can try it if you want, but the staff,
No,
I think,
no.
it's got a lot more important issues to work through than a dog on the beach when we can do it through a survey and either get a consensus that way to bring it here to the council and make it make some sense.
I'm pretty sure that was part of a survey question, just for the record.
I don't know. I haven't seen the survey, but I don't like
It's being,
spending
it's in the
staff time
preliminary
on stuff that
stages,
we
yeah.
don't- that
Yeah.
You got a consensus tonight that nobody agrees with it, so.
Yeah.
No, I mean, just for
And
the
you-
record, so
well-
you heard 3 that were somewhat open to it. 3.
Right,
Yeah,
well,
so-
I'm not gonna be, if I see 9,910 people out of the 10,000 voted for dogs on the beach, well, yeah, I'm gonna support it. Because I'm gonna support what the community, not what a few people want. And, social media is full of people talking, but 90% of those people don't live in the city that are on there.
That's
I
not
see
true.
Cocoa Beach. I know a lady at Cocoa, and it drives me up the wall every Sunday about, why don't you let dogs on it? And she lives in Cocoa Beach. She wants to bring her dog up here. Let her have her dog down there.
Well, Angela has an answer for that.
Lady has grown me up
Take
the
your
wall
dog and
for
stay home
5 years over this.
and no come back.
They got a dog park. She wants to know why we don't have a dog park. Well, city don't really need a dog park, I would think.
But we have dogs in the park. Yeah,
We
no.
don't.
Yeah, we'll talk about that, Wes.
Sure.
But the
I like
short
it. It
the
was
short
good.
answer is we do have quite a bit of information and a lot of staff level thoughts on it. And we heard what the council said loud and clear, and the potential definite no's or of a degree of interest in those things. But yeah, at tomorrow's staff meeting, we'll put them to work.
Thank you. And thank everyone again for taking the time to do that. So,
Anybody else got anything to say? Well, I'm ready to go home. Anybody?
That sounds great.
Meeting adjourned. We're going home. No reports, not tonight. Wait, no reports, not tonight. Nothing that important. I can tell you a whole lot of stuff I've done. I don't care to read. I'm gonna go home. My back's hurting, my legs hurting.
Borrow this.
About 4 hours ago.
I'll give it right back.
Have the whole thing.
I just need to scan it into the public records. Thank you so much.
The older you get.
Give us 2 sheets of paper there with it.
Okay. Yeah,
I
those will go
definitely
with.
told her I'm gonna help them either financially and people-wise. I'll gather
Okay.
people up to work.
Okay. Thank you. You got everything signed?
Yes, ma'am, I think so.
There was a lot to sign.
yeah. Sorry, it was a little longer. Congratulations. I wasn't going to get in the way of you. It's separate issues. Thank you. Thank you. They can't stop the workshop. Yes. And I'm heading through those. Awareness phase, and you were such a huge resource. Good. I know, that's what I have it right here. I have your form. Is it better than it's standing? Coming around.